Hey guys, this is Brad and Mike from Dallas Geek, and we are back with our friend David for yet another roundtable.
Friend's a little strong.
Well, Brad's my friend.
Yeah. But yes, we are back for another roundtable. This time we're going to be talking about the top 10 Steven Spielberg movies.
Hey, we're live.
Yes, we are.
Cool.
We're alive.
You're on silent.
I gotta tell you guys, first of all,
I saw a flashing light. I'm sorry.
thank you so much to both of you for having me on. I want to tell everybody out there, you need to subscribe. You need to watch these guys. They're awesome. And all of the post-production stuff I was telling you guys before we started is so cool, so amazing. And in honor of me being on here, and we're getting ready to talk about, you both know, someone very dear, close to my heart, not just because he's also Jewish, but because
You're Jewish?
he's one of my favorite... You didn't know?
No.
It's amazing. Okay, with all that, but I got to just start off with this. There's only one topic that would get me to mimic our friend over here, Mike. Go ahead and, who are we going to be talking about today?
Spielberg.
First 30 seconds. Nice. I'm ready to go.
That's right. First 30 seconds, you got us.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So, we are totally not doing this because Ready Player One is coming out this week. No, definitely not trying to get on the Spielberg.
Two of us are
train for that.
totally not seeing it tomorrow night.
But with that, our top 10 has been ranked in average of what our individual rankings were. So there are going to be some arguments as to what got placed where.
Yep.
And what got left off the list.
Yep.
So, just as a quick, let's get it out of the way now, the honorable mentions that did not make the list, but do deserve to at least be brought up for a second. Obviously, you had Lincoln. That was just visually gorgeous. It was probably, I mean, for me, one of Spielberg's most subdued movies, especially with just the way that the camera work was done. It felt very calm by comparison to so much else that he's done.
Spielberg does an amazing job, and I would compare Lincoln to another film. Really, Lincoln, The Post, and Amistad have very similar formulaic kind of roads that Spielberg uses, which are much more dialogue centered than they are visual sensory. It's really audio sensory in many ways. And he still has great shots and things, but I think Lincoln, I also think that's the brilliance of Spielberg that we'll continue to talk about, which is Mike and I have had this conversation for years, and Brad can start to have this conversation with us and people out there, which is when people say to me, well, David, who's the greatest director of all time? Who's your favorite director? All these kinds of things that come up, right? And the reason that I go back to Spielberg again and again and again and again, and I tell people this, there's a number of reasons, but one of my top reasons is I don't believe that there is another director out there who has been able to make great films in pretty much every genre. And even though Spielberg has a very distinct style with some of his visuals and camera work and lighting, all of that stuff, if you turned on Lincoln, I don't think that someone who had never seen it before, heard nothing about it, would say that's a Spielberg movie.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty amazing that you could watch that. And I think, but I'm with Lincoln is incredible because it is a mastery of political conversation and the way it works. And again, like you said, beautifully shot. And I love that movie.
Well, more than just the acting, the way that the movie is color graded and the way that the lighting is put in at such a very fine blending between the lights and the shadows really gives it a very almost painted look to it, where from scene to scene, every character, you have to really, really look. It doesn't have that modern movie quality of the details are just like popping out of the screen because it's just clearly all digital, high quality this or that, very sharp this, whatever. No, it was just so well blended together. It felt like you're watching a moving painting.
And I've done way too much research on Spielberg. Mike knows this. They brought me in, and I'm a Spielberg nut. There are people out there who probably know more than me, but I've done extensive research on this guy, and part of that also has to do with that he brings the same crew.
Yeah.
He uses the same people.
Yeah.
So you're talking about the lighting right now. So, and I would immediately say to you, Janusz Kaminski, because Janusz Kaminski has worked pretty much every single Spielberg, everything you've seen. And it's gotten to the point when you read or hear Spielberg interviews that he will explain that he just has to hand Janusz the script. And it's almost like they're thinking with one brain in a sense, because Janusz walks in and says, this is what Steven wants, and this is how he wants to use it. And so you see that. So in some ways, what I said is a little off, where someone who doesn't know about it wouldn't necessarily know it's a Lincoln film, but people who know Spielberg look at it and go, oh, there's Janusz Kaminski, because that's the way that this is lit. And even in this, I remember in Lincoln, it was very hard for me to leave Lincoln off the top 10 list, by the way. And one of the reasons
Me
was
too.
it was really hard, but it was because I think what we kind of came to was not necessarily, first of all, any list. These guys made me do something I have never done my entire life, which is do a top 10 Spielberg list. But it was our favorite Spielberg movies, not necessarily the most well done or the most beautiful or the most whatever. It's our favorite.
Yeah. Well, for me, my favorites also happen to be the ones that I think are some of his most technically brilliant movies. But at the same time, there are a couple that I had to leave off of my list that I'm looking at going, I need that movie in my life, but I can't necessarily say that it is the most genius piece of work that he's ever done, but it is something that I hold very dear. So, yeah.
Lincoln is, and that's what, and then Mike, you can take over with Lincoln, but I think that something as simple as Lincoln sitting on a stairwell or being in a small office room surrounded by two people because of the lighting, because of the music, because of the just artistic way that he shoots a scene, just changes everything. And it makes what could be, if you just read the script, as, oh my God, what is this dialogue that we're looking at? Whoa, like, that was intense or amazing. Just be people talking to each other.
Well, and that's kind of the brilliance of it, is that the simplicity of it is like, hey, we're going to make this as stripped down as possible, and we're going to let the dialogue do the work, but more importantly, we're going to let the actors do the work.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I mean, it didn't really hurt that he had so many high quality actors he was working with in that movie.
Daniel Day-Lewis is Lincoln. He was Lincoln from the moment he was born to the moment he played that role. I mean, he looked like him, sounded like him, but all of them. I mean, it was such a brilliantly casted film.
And that's part of what Spielberg does so well too, on top of the directing, is getting the casting down. Because it seems like with every movie, dude, there are roles that he's casted that I can't picture anybody else playing.
Oh yeah, well, he understands more than just his actors. He understands the characters of his movies to such an extent that he already has an idea of, this is who should be this person. It's never really, this is who I want, this is who might be nice. It always feels like his perspective is, this is the person that should be this character. And when you see the results and you see how he's able to direct them, it's hard to disagree.
And where I go when people say to me, why do you think Spielberg is the greatest? Well, I think of stories like, and for those of you who you should go, there's so much stuff out there. And the new documentary on HBO that you can see, Spielberg, is 2 hours and 40 minutes, but it's 2 hours and 40 minutes that, in my opinion, not only should film students watch and anyone interested, but it will make you appreciate not just Spielberg, but film in general more than, I don't know if you guys have gotten this. It's amazing. But you talk about a guy in Spielberg who would walk around. He just walks around film locations, and in his life like this, people talk about it because that's the way he sees things. But the reason, and I'm not trying to make a joke here, the reason why I don't put the James Camerons of the world, and I don't put the George Lucases of the world, and I don't even put the Martin Scorseses, who I love, on that pinnacle of pinnacles, because Spielberg matches the visual genius with the artistic imagination, with the heart and the emotion, and all of that color comes together, and you have a piece of art. And I mean, that's the thing. He's an artist. Like, he's not a director. No. He's not a geek techie guy. He's an artist, and he's changed the world forever. Yeah. And you can just look at that. And that's why when people ask me and they say, man, like, I say, because that's what makes you the greatest. Yeah. Like, that's what makes you the greatest. It's just amazing. That we can have a top 10 list, and you're still sitting there and having to wonder, well, wait, we let Lincoln off the list, or we let 10 other movies off the list. How amazing is that? There is no other director that you could do that with, or that you would be having self-debates with yourself about, I can't believe I'm going to make this list and leave that off. It's incredible.
Well, it's so ironic to me that you have so many of your typical film students that will be very pretentious about Spielberg and say, oh, no, you like a Spielberg movie? You're clearly not well-versed in cinema. So you're clearly just a plebeian here. You don't deserve to breathe the same creative air as I do.
You give him the How I Met Your Mother. Just the, oh, honey.
Yeah.
Like,
and the best is
let's sit down and talk.
And the best is that I would turn to them, and I'd turn to people like that, and I'd say, okay, who do you consider a great director? And other than, and they're going to go down the world, and they're going to give you Fellini, and they're going to go Hitchcock, and they're going to give you all of these big names. But as soon as they start going into the world of modern day stuff, and after Spielberg came along, I would be sitting there, oh, you like Christopher Nolan. Oh, you like J.J. Abrams.
Yeah.
Oh, you think that's very interesting that you find that these directors, and especially some of the newer, ones who are coming
Abrams
out.
Did a movie that was basically a love letter
an homage to him and Super 8. But it's like, well, you realize that half of that stuff that guy had is taken from original stuff that Spielberg was doing.
Oh, yeah.
So it makes me laugh that people, you know what, you can have that opinion, but at the end of the day, you cannot deny the greatness and the artistry of the man one way or the other. I know people, and the funny thing is, and we're going to get into this, Mike, because Mike's going to bring up a movie that he thinks should have been in the list that's not in the list, and I'm going to bring up to him, and you can go ahead. Do you want anything more about Lincoln? Because I want you to get into one of the ones that you want to talk about. Go ahead.
I think we're good. Do you want to?
No,
I'm good with Lincoln. Lincoln. So you got to see Lincoln.
Our next honorable mention, that was Mike's preference that he fought tooth and nail to try to get on the list for.
That I actually had at number 3 on my list.
Yeah, which was
Last Crusade. Had it 2 spots higher than Raiders. Had it above Jaws. I'm sorry, that's the best Indiana Jones movie to me. Now go.
No. Go ahead. No. And why do you think it's the best Indiana Jones movie?
Man, for me, it was so. We're taking Temple of Doom and we're putting it over here, right?
And there's things about Temple of Doom
I love, by the way.
There's things about Temple of Doom that I love. And by the way, Spielberg will continue to talk about it. I don't mind interjecting little pieces that you may or may not know. He was going through a very dark time in his life. Right. And Spielberg has always, as we'll continue to talk about, he has lots of issues. And we'll talk about daddy issues. And we'll talk about family issues. And we'll talk about all these issues. He was going through a divorce with Amy Irving. Yep. He was in an incredibly dark place in his life. He makes Temple of Doom, which is, there is a lot of brilliance in Temple of Doom that people don't want to acknowledge. You talk about lighting, and you talk about the camera. I mean, I could go over the scene where they are in the, I guess, what do we call it, the mine train, kind of whatever you want to call it. I mean, that is legendary stuff. The guy reaching in and grabbing his heart out. I mean, so outrageous, so ridiculous, but you remember it forever. The drawbridge. I mean, there's so much stuff.
Well, for me, Temple of Doom was one of those films that it's grown on me over time. Like, I started off with it, and I had a very hard time accepting it as a good Indiana Jones film, let alone a good movie, because there was just so much about it that just, it was so
It was a 180.
odd compared to so much else that he had done, so much else that it felt like Indiana Jones stood for, and I couldn't quite wrap my mind around so much of the concepts behind it. But as I've gotten older, I've been able to appreciate a little bit more about the visual, the use of certain visual images, the use of certain themes throughout the movie. I will never say the acting ability of the co-star, but I
Leave his poor wife alone, Kate. Leave Kate alone. She was great in Space Camp. Leave Kate Capshaw alone. I love you, Kate. Steve, you can do no wrong. He found love, he found happiness, and they have had literally the Cinderella marriage ever since. They've adopted all these kids.
Which I will never hold against him.
And he made some of his best work after he met her.
Yeah, I can't say that
she's not the Yoko. She's not the Yoko.
I can't say that she clearly hasn't been some proper muse for him.
Yeah, I mean, she's been a great muse.
There has been a significant shift in his work since they've been together.
Because the big knock on Spielberg, we got off topic a little bit, and we'll come back to Indiana because I'm going to nail you on something, man. But the big knock on Spielberg, which this guy always loved to sit there and shout from the rooftop, which was the rom-com. He couldn't make a great romantic movie, yada, yada, yada. He didn't have that in him. And always, David, and always, and blah, blah, which again, by the way, always... If you want to rate it on a Spielberg scale, you can give it plenty of criticism and say this doesn't live up to it. But after Kate Capshaw, he makes The Terminal. And The Terminal is a great romantic movie. Yeah. And I would argue with you, there's some great romantic aspects in weird ways of Hook. And there's some great stuff in there that he's done. And I could argue with you that there's a whole list of stuff that he did after Kate Capshaw, where you could argue that if that was the part missing from his life that he didn't have with Amy Irving or wherever, there's some great romantic stuff in Jurassic Park, some of his more action-oriented films. And in even the one that you're going to give me crap on, he's going to give me so much crap on, and I'm about to nail you for this.
Go ahead.
The Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
We don't talk about that here.
I know you don't like to talk about. There is great stuff in that movie between him and Karen Allen when they reunite and get together.
Well, sure.
Whether you like it or you don't, there's great stuff in there, and the chemistry of them reunite, and it's great.
And that's the thing.
I don't disagree, but they developed shy out of it.
They developed a strong chemistry in Raiders.
Yes.
And any opportunity to bring the two of them back together was always going to have some element there.
But he did some great stuff with that in that movie with the two of them. That he could have been silly and goofy on, and he wasn't. And you can say whatever you want. He did some good stuff, but now it goes
silly and goofy in that movie.
Here's my problem. Okay, so this is a great opening. This is a segue. Okay, wait.
Really?
But this is a segue that we didn't even mean to go with.
Sorry,
we're going to go with now.
Natasha, where's Boris?
Okay. God bless. Now, I love Kate too. She was pretty bad. But hold on. But time out. And this is why, Mike, I come back to Raiders versus Last Crusade. And we're going to focus on Raiders more as we go along.
Oh, yeah.
But I love Last Crusade.
I think it's
Last Crusade is a great movie.
No, it's fantastic.
It's wonderful. I enjoy it. I love it. But here's the issue when you talk about the greatest Indiana Jones movie, and here's the reason why I disagree with you guys on Kingdom of Crystal Skull. Not that it's the best Indiana Jones movie, not that all this stuff. It's because Spielberg and Lucas and Kasdan created a world in Indiana Jones that was silly, that was goofy, that was totally meant to be a archaeologist adventure of finding these old relics that were based on the old 30s and 40s and these things that were like every week you saw. And in Raiders of the Lost Ark, I can take you down the road of some ridiculous, silly moments in that movie with Salah and with the guy that he's going against. Then I can take you to Temple of Doom, where he does. A lot of people like to focus in on the second act of that with the darkness and all of the evil and everything, and they forget that the first part of that movie has genius stuff with Club Obi-Wan and all the ridiculous musical interlude and the waiter and the shooting and I have the antidote, to Dr. Jones and the plane ride and he closes the door and then they're in the palace and the famous eating scene and they're all sitting there with the snakes coming out and then where they find the secret passage and she's running around freaking out, with the bugs in her hair and all that stuff. And that ties right into Last Crusade. And there's so much ridiculousness in Last Crusade. Fun moments and silliness and things that are going on with Denholm Elliott and everything. Him walking around going, does anybody understand what I'm talking about? Anybody speak this language or that? So then you go to Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And everybody wants to, again, at that
I swear
point.
If you see the monkey scene, I'm going to
No, but everyone at that point wants to treat Indiana Jones like this holy trinity, like this Bible, like this, taking itself too seriously. And Steven Spielberg and George Lucas and Lawrence Kasdan never took themselves that seriously.
I would disagree very much.
They did not. I don't agree with that. I think the fans took it seriously. I don't think they did.
I would disagree to the extent that Last Crusade had quite a few very serious elements to it that if you take it in comparison to the amount of lighthearted elements, does make the movie more of a serious film than a lighthearted flick.
I think that every Indiana Jones movie except for Kingdom of a Crystal Skull had that balance for the most part. And I think that in Temple of Doom, there is serious stuff going on with this village who's starving and these kids being enslaved and all of that stuff going on. And in Raiders of the Lost Ark, my God, I mean, no one had ever used Nazis in a film where you could chuckle a little bit and laugh a little bit at kind of what was going on with that. And he creates that.
Mel Brooks did it.
In what Mel Brooks didn't, the producers did it, but he did it in a way that was not done in showing the same thing that this guy was showing. I mean, I think that's a fair thing, what you're saying. So my comment to you guys is I hear what you're saying, but come on, guys. Last Crusade that I love, you have some of the most ridiculous, laughable moments.
But
in
you
that
also have
there's 100,000-year-old knight that's just sitting there waiting for them. You chose poorly. Okay?
You want to do a timer?
There's that's just my point. There's moments, she talks in her sleep. I love that, Junior. I mean, come on. Like, there's so much silliness. There's so much
But there's also so
ridiculousness.
much seriousness.
There is, but I'm saying in Kingdom of a Crystal Skull was a fan movie. He made it because the fans wanted them to come back. He had no intention of doing another Indiana Jones movie.
I don't
That's why
disagree
he
with any of
stayed
that.
out
When
of
you
it
look
for
at
so
Last Crusade,
long.
like one of the things you kind of tackled on was the daddy issues, which is
yes, 100%.
But he tackles that very seriously in Last Crusade.
In sequences, I would say the biggest moment is the moment where they're in the Hindenburg and he's like talking to him and he's like, "What? I'm here now. What would you like to talk about?"
Right.
And then the moment where Sean Connery's basically dying,
right,
and he's doing that whole in the Penitent Man. You see all that. Yes, there is some of that, and you see that, but again, I think you're missing the fact that in Raiders and Temple of Doom and Last Crusade, he's having fun, Spielberg.
Sure.
He's having fun. He's not, these are not, and we're going to get into the more serious films. He's looking at it as what he created, which was Indiana Jones, the swashbuckling, the archaeologist. Don't take this so serious. And he creates a masterpiece world that none of us have ever seen. And then everyone wants to take it so seriously after that. But then I've always said this, take them out of order. Yeah. Put some of these movies differently. And if you had seen them before you saw one of the others, you probably would be more favorable to them than you are. So if Last Crusade came before Raiders, you would be sitting there going, whoa, I've never seen anything like this before. That's
But I also don't
amazing.
think that they would
If
be
you
the
had
same
seen
movie
Temple
if you
of
would've done
Doom,
that a whole lot.
no, it wouldn't be. But I'm saying if you take them in isolated things, and I've always said that with Spielberg, that you have to be fair to the process of they created this, they did this, and then they do what they want with it. And if you would never have sat there and watched Raiders with the same fine pen, and comb and going over it and going, I'm going to be really critical of what he does here and now because of what my expectations are, because your expectations have been built so out of the stratosphere. I don't think there's anything Spielberg could have done with Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I'm being honest about this. Did he make certain choices that pissed people off more than maybe it would have? Yeah, I'll say that. But I don't necessarily I think it's a no-win situation. I think making another Indiana Jones movie, which I know he's going to do Indiana Jones 5 that they're already talking about, and Harrison Ford said he's done, there's nothing the man can do that's going to satisfy or make you believe that it can live up to the expectations of Raiders or Last Crusade or any. There's just nothing he can do.
If you believe people that read it, you could have gone with Frank Darabont's original script.
But you never saw Frank Darabont's original script, so you don't know what that was.
But it's out there.
But you don't know what it was. But Frank Darabont wasn't the genius creator behind this stuff. So who knows what he would have come up with. I mean, that's all. That's my 2 cents.
Sure.
We've gone over on it. That's my 2 cents on it. I hear you. I think Last Crusade is a great movie. I love Indiana Jones. It's amazing.
I still think you're being too kind on Crystal Skull.
I just give it's the same way why I give a pass when it comes to Star Wars stuff to some of the later films that Lucas did, because I am a firm believer that when genius created his own world, he then gets that extra leeway or her extra leeway to create what they create. Because if you're going to be so critical about that universe that they've made, then you have to be as critical about each individual work. And if I wanted to be critical about Last Crusade, I could sit there and point out so many different ridiculous moments in that movie with him and her.
Sure.
The scenes in the boats when they're driving with the guys coming after them and he's going, go between them. Go between them. Like, we would be laughing hysterically
at the same time, you have to take into consideration that especially when you're talking guys at the level of the Lucas and Spielberg, artists that get to a certain point in their career, you can't just give them a universal pass that says as long as they're continuing to touch something that they've done before, they're always right. Every big artist over the course of history has gotten to a point where their ego gets in the way and they get way too full of themselves, and they have to be able to be. And a lot of
I agree. I don't give up, but I don't give them a universal pass. I just say that I think we as the consumers and we as the fans have to be more careful in our criticism of them, because you guys, look, I sat here and listened to the two of you on the pod I was on berate the fanboys for their reviews of Last Jedi, and I feel like there's a little bit of that in there, that you're like, what did you want them to do? What were you expecting? So my turnaround to you would be, what do you want Spielberg to do? What are you expecting?
Different kind of thing, because you have to come in knowing, just realizing that there were so many elements of that movie that had very clear indications that everybody involved they didn't have enough people saying no to them behind the scenes. That there was a lot of stuff that felt very first draft about the movie, about the script, about every element of it that really should never have been allowed to have made it to the point of filming, because somebody should have been in there trying to rein the egos back in.
You're talking about Kingdom of a Crystal Skull?
Yeah. Just rein the egos back in and say, hey, guys, maybe this is going a little too far down the road. Maybe this is something that
I'll tell you one thing that totally irked me.
Could it be done slightly more subdued?
And I think you and I have talked about this. I don't know if you and I have talked about this, but with Last Crusade, you ended with, it's time for you to face what you truly believe, and the leap of faith, the penitent man. It's all a big leap of faith and what your truly beliefs are.
Right.
And then you get to Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and he's like, no, aliens can't exist. Oh, I'm sorry, you just drank from the Holy Grail. And you're going to sit there and tell me, like, it's totally impossible that...
But I also think the message at the end of Kingdom of Crystal Skull, which got lost by a lot of people, was genius. What was the message at the end of Kingdom of Crystal Skull? Because I bet neither of you picked up.
No, I blocked that shit out of my mind.
Exactly right. They're family friendly.
Whatever.
Well, do you remember what the real message was? It
You
got
don't
lost
get
on this. Whether you like where you went with it, I thought the message was genius. Because the message that Indiana Jones, through all the first 3 films, constantly went back to was he was always searching for glory, and he was always searching for fame, and he was always searching for his treasure. And finally, after all of that, he's still the same guy as he goes through each other. Remember, one movie's supposed to happen before, one the prequel. Remember, Raiders of the Lost Ark is supposed to happen after Temple of Doom. A lot of people forget that. Temple of Doom was actually a prequel, correct? And then Last Crusade brings it together. And he's constantly in that fortune and glory, fortune and glory, fortune and glory. And in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, whether you like the execution or you don't, whether you like the aliens or you don't, it came down in the end where it was about knowledge.
Right, but
I thought that was a cool twist.
You don't get to do that because he already does it at the end of Last Crusade.
No, but he doesn't. No, he doesn't. Because at the end of Last Crusade, his father still sits there and has to give him a fatherly talk about, the Grail, that you have to let it go.
Right.
Let it go, Indiana. Let it go. And as they ride off with that great biblical text that they go, as they ride off with it, and you have the horsemen and going off on that image, Indiana still doesn't buy it. He doesn't buy it. He believes he's listening to his dad. He's listening to his dad.
I don't agree
but
with that
I
at
don't
all.
think he truly agrees that because he's still looking back there. And then is he concerned about her, that he lost her?
No.
Is he concerned about losing the Grail? And he says she never really believed in the Grail and believed in it.
It was
and
just a treasure for her.
Right. But you're like, okay, he has some awareness. But I don't think he's not still, and I think that's proven.
I think you're reading too far into it,
Yeah.
which is so hard in a Spielberg movie. But I think this case you're reading too far into it.
Could be.
I think that the ending was meant to be wrapped up as simply as it seemed. There wasn't.
But why does he still go on the next adventure then? Why does he go on the next adventure? He goes on the next adventure because he still has unfinished stuff to accomplish. At least, and again, that's Spielberg's creative world. So I have to go off the fact that they made another movie.
To be fair, that next movie, in the context of that movie, it did seem like he had been out of the archeology game for quite a while.
For a long time.
So, working for the
because
government.
he was, exactly.
And who's to say that anything that he had done between the Last Crusade and Crystal Skull was anywhere near the same level of glory hunting as had been happening before?
Look, I continue to say Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is not, the other 3 movies are far superior. They're better films, but I continue to say that I don't think Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is as bad as people want to believe it is because it's being held to such a ridiculous standard.
And I think you're a much nicer man than me.
It could be, but I love Spielberg.
Sure. I also think, like I said, Indiana Jones is Last Crusade is the best indie movie.
When
I think it's the most
we
complete
get to
indie
Raiders, then we'll talk
go
about
back.
what I think.
Okay.
Yeah, why I think it doesn't match up.
I think we've spent more than enough time on Indy for a second. The last 2 honorable mentions, really quickly, because we actually do need to get to the top 10 that we said we're going to be getting to. So the last 2 honorable mentions was my contribution, Hook, that I thought there was so much cinematically that was brilliant about it. And there is so much artistic value to the creativity of bringing essentially a child's imagination to life on screen with so many elements of that. The most striking to me still is my favorite scene of the entire movie, the Never Feast. There is so much creativity in that scene that I can guarantee you when all of us were kids, the second any of us had to come up with some imaginary idea of what would be the coolest feast, just out of this world feast that would we could come up with, it would probably, if we think back, it was probably something close to that before we ever even saw that scene.
No.
So it was just so brilliant in how well they did that.
Plus, it was a great take on the character.
Oh, yeah.
Just that kind of imaginative, like he leaves Neverland and he goes and he gets old.
Yeah.
I watched Hook. I, for years, defended Hook.
I
was very young when Hook came out.
That might be his movie that gets the least amount of love that deserves so much better.
So much more.
I think there's so many levels of Hook that people laughed off because in their mind at the time, you have to remember that when Hook came out, you had this all-star cast. Yeah. All of these superstars were in that movie.
Julia Roberts,
Robin Williams, Dustin Hoffman, Bob Hoskins was big back then. Gosh. You have Maggie Smith, who turned into a huge actress, but it was this litany of superstars that everybody was craving and clamoring over. But the thing about Hook was, if you go back and you watch it now and you judge it just by what it is. Yeah. It is so stood the test of time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I say that in a bit as a fun little thing because time is what's amazing about that movie. Yeah. Time is the key in that movie. So first off, people who praised Dick Tracy and the artistic amazement of Dick Tracy when Warren Beatty, you should be the same people that are salivating and family-friendly, orgasming, if that's a word, over...
Why wouldn't it be?
Hook. Because, Mike, because I can show you 20 scenes in Hook. From being in the clock museum, to being in the pirate ship in Hook's room, to being in the kids' rooms, to being in Neverland under the water and the mermaids and the Never Feast and all of the things that Brad and Mike are talking about with this that are so genius from an artistic level and a visual level. And then you mix in, there are so many scenes to me that are some that I would put on some of my top Spielberg scenes.
Part of the reason why it visually stands up to the test of time is because due to the setting that it's in, it doesn't matter that the pirates hideout, the village that they have, whatever, looks in certain elements like parts of a stage play. It doesn't matter that that when you get the bird's eye view of all of what Neverland is, it feels like you're looking a little bit at a miniature model. It doesn't matter because the context is this is a place pulled from your imagination, and it doesn't need to feel so real. It has to feel like it is something pulled out of the imagination of a kid, and that is exactly the kind of stuff that they would be imagining because that's the context that they would have. And so it doesn't need to feel more realistic like so many modern takes on these type of fairy tales are, because it's not that.
But what's great is, and this goes back to what you guys were talking about before, when you talk to some young film student or something, I would turn to them. Here's a perfect example. You like Martin Scorsese? You like Gangs of New York? You think that Gangs of New York was pretty sensational the way they showed you the 5 points? Well, guess what? In 1991, Spielberg did it first. Yep. He did it with all of those scenes in Neverland. Yep. Oh, you like that Quentin Tarantino or Scorsese one camera following something all the way through? Go back to Hook and look when he's got the hook and he's walking through everything for the first time that you actually see Dustin Hoffman's character as Captain Hook, and he does it with one camera and he's following him through the whole city of everything going on. You like all those shots? Because Spielberg was doing it 20 years ago, 25 years ago in a movie that you don't think is that great. Yeah. And it's all right there for you, and he's doing it all.
Well, and that's actually a really interesting point right there, because Spielberg does have so many great one-shot scenes that he doesn't make it like obvious. He doesn't throw it in your face that, oh, it's a single tracking shot where we're not going to edit, we're not going to cut, we're not going to do anything. We're just going to make one camera that follows through a single scene. That's all it is. He doesn't make it obvious, but if you really look, there's a reason why certain scenes feel more natural, feel more organic. It's because of that type of stuff.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So then the last of our honorable mentions was AI. And This one, there's no way it could possibly make it into a top 10 for Spielberg because as a whole, there were a lot of things wrong with it as a movie. But to see someone of the caliber that Spielberg is try to replicate the cinematic style of, I mean, one of the most meticulous and anal retentive directors of all time, who just happened to be one of his closest friends.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a unique thing to experience, and while it did not come out as a fantastic movie, it came out as a very interesting exercise in artistic creation, especially for somebody who was already so set in his artistic methods.
Right. I think it's a good way to put it. It was a, I guess, homage.
Yeah,
would be a really good way to say it.
It would be like watching. It would be like trying to see Picasso try to reinvent a Pollock. I mean, obviously, timelines don't really work like that. That well for that one, but it's the same concept.
No, absolutely.
It's taking somebody that's so, just so dramatically different in style and trying to say, hey, why don't you do this? Just see if you can.
He took notes from Kubrick. That's what he had. He had notes. He had tons and tons of notes. And he made a movie that if anyone watches would think Stanley Kubrick made the film.
And a lot of people still do today.
Still to this day. And we will never know. My brother Brian, who's a big film nut and went to film school and knows this stuff, and he and I have this debate all the time, which is we would love to know as far as certain things with what Kubrick's direction was, how closely he followed some of the plot lines and the theme lines, but from a strictly visual standpoint, from a mood standpoint, from a tempo standpoint, he did what no one thought was possible, which was to recreate a Stanley Kubrick film. And for me, I actually like AI a lot. I'm a big fan of AI. Some people are not. A lot of people are not. I'm a big fan.
Okay.
I'm a big fan of AI, and I will never forget people who said to me after that movie, it should have ended when they were, if it had been Kubrick, he would have ended it with him at the bottom of the ocean facing the thing, and the movie ends and he's trapped down there and the world, and you know what I said to someone? I said, you missed the point. I believe that this is possibly, and you guys can roll your eyes or go, what are you talking about, David? I believe the ending of this film is probably the most controversial, epic, incredible endings in film history, let alone in Spielberg's history, and I will tell you why.
Okay.
The end of the movie is the kid has, spoiler alert, David, thank you very much, David gets his last day.
Yeah.
And his last day is to be with his dead mother, all these hundreds of years later after the ends or whatever, and Teddy and all of this stuff. And it's basically his choice of that he can bring her back, but she's going to die at the end. Sure. And it's a very cruel choice.
Sure.
It's a very Sophie's Choice kind of a thing when you think about it. And he chooses to bring her back. And they have this amazing day and everything he ever wanted in this perfect day. And what happens at the end of this movie? They climb into bed, and Teddy comes into bed with them, and she's like, oh, I'm starting to feel tired. And she's clearly going, this is the end, and he knows it and everything. And you have this voiceover of, for the first time in his life, David found that place between sleep and dreams and where he was. And people walked out, and my brother was one who was like, oh, it was such a happy Spielberg little touch of an ending. No. And I went, no way. No. I went, this is dark. This is disturbing. It is creepy. Yeah. It is very Kubrick-like in a lot of what he did. And that ending gets me every single time where I say, this is genius. I said, I can't put my finger on it, but it is there is genius in those last 10 to 15 minutes of that movie.
I don't know if Spielberg's ever actually come out and said in any interview how much influence Kubrick had on the overall story, especially the ending.
Right.
But just looking at it, knowing that Kubrick had always intended to do this movie as a retelling of Pinocchio, I don't see that ending as Spielberg's way of trying to put a lighthearted twist to it.
No, I don't either.
I feel that is the kind of movie that that ending would be absolutely included in Kubrick's version as well, just because there is so much about it that without it, the story of Pinocchio would not be complete.
Right.
And Kubrick being as just as OCD about a complete story and just having a complete vision on film as
Except
he
for
was.
Eyes Wide Shut.
Well,
Still don't know what the hell the ending of that movie was.
As OCD as he was about so much of that stuff, I just feel that if that wasn't the ending, that he would not have been happy with it, because it's the only logical way to wrap it up and still maintain the tone that the movie has had.
Right. That ending gets me every time. I'm telling you, it is an ending of Spielberg's that you'll never forget. Like, you can say you like the movie, you don't like the movie, but that ending, I put that right up there with so many of the great endings in films that you go, holy cow, what in the world? Like, that was, AI is a fascinating movie. I actually like it a lot, and I always consider putting it on a top Spielberg, whatever, not over those other movies, but when you can do what he did to mimic Kubrick, holy cow.
All right, so
we ready?
We can finally hit our top 10 after what's probably been
close to an hour.
Yes. Oh, good Lord.
That's okay. 25 hours.
That's okay.
Jeez. Okay, so number 10 on our list officially is Close Encounters. So, everybody okay with this placement? Anybody want to argue it?
Why are you looking at me?
Because we know you were the one who left this off your list.
I did leave this off my list.
Explain.
It's great. It's fine. I think Spielberg had better sci-fi movies. And that's how I kind of looked at it.
Sci-fi movies or better movies?
Both.
So here's the thing. Close Encounters was such a defining film within the sci-fi genre that I have a hard time leaving it off of a top 10 list for Spielberg. It may not be one of my actual favorite movies, but it just did so much to define the genre.
No, I don't disagree, but I had Minority Report on there, which is going to be coming up. I had E.T. on there, which is going to be coming up.
Sure.
I don't know. I consider Jurassic Park to be sci-fi. I don't know about you guys.
It's in the realm.
It's definitely
at least got some in there.
At least sci-fi adjacent.
Sure.
At least, if not fully.
I just don't. My problem is with it. First of all, I think Close Encounters is a brilliant movie. It's genius on so many different levels.
Yeah.
And again, you have characters and lighting and music. Dun, 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 dun. I mean, any movie that you can do that to, and we can do that with multiple movies. And again, part of that cast, part of the crew we'll talk about, John Williams. I mean, the legend. The mashed potato scene, the spaceship, the music.
Richard Dreyfuss in general in that movie
is unbelievable.
It's a great movie.
It's a great movie. And I think one of the most interesting things about Spielberg as a person is that he has talked about, we continue to talk about the daddy issues, right? Mm-hmm. And what is Spielberg now? He has famously said that, and I pose this question to you guys, I don't know if you know this or not, but he has now famously said that if he had made this film now, he would not have allowed Richard Dreyfuss to get on that spaceship. Right. And I think, I would hope that we can all agree he has to get on that spaceship, and it's not the same movie without it. And it's like, thank God, Stephen, that you did not make this movie
Thank God
today.
For all the daddy issues.
Yes, exactly. Thank God for all the daddy issues. But
there are definitely so many of his movies that are what they are because of his daddy issues.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, you want to talk about somebody whose career was made from daddy issues. Spielberg is probably one of the best examples.
And he might be the example.
Close Encounters is... I really do think if he didn't have the daddy issues that he had, if he didn't have his abandonment issues that he was trying to deal with at that time, there is no way the movie could have been made at all, because there's so much about the movie that relies on abandonment issues to push it forward. And regardless of if he thinks he could have still done it or not, I personally think that is one of the defining reasons behind his ability to make it in the first place.
Yes, absolutely. I just think Close Encounters changes the sci-fi genre forever when it comes out. Yeah. I think that people were inspired forever by it. You saw copycats, you saw people trying to do the same kind of artistic, again, lighting and musical stuff, and trying to incorporate that. And I think, I believe it would be on any list of mine for Spielberg's top 10, but I would also challenge you that I think it could be on any sci-fi list top 10, top 15 films of all time.
And it is on a lot of them, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it's so brilliant.
All right, so number 9 is Minority Report. So Minority Report is a very interesting movie.
The concept is amazing. Yeah, like when you actually think about it, it's solving crimes before they happen.
Philosophically, it is one of it might be one of his most philosophically difficult movies to come to terms with, simply because there are so many different
issues.
Well, even more than that.
No, even higher than that.
I mean, you go into just the very basic concept behind the technology that they're talking about in that movie.
The oracles.
It is a whole level of what should be acceptable. Is this okay? How can we do this? If we were actually given this opportunity in real life, is this something that not only should we do, but is it morally right to do it?
Morally, it's a very, it might be his, I don't want to say it's his deepest movie in terms of questioning morality, but it's way up there.
Because it's more than just the morality of the characters, it's the morality of the concept of the story. Yep. Because if you can't wrap your head around choosing, yes, this whole concept is morally acceptable, or no, it's not acceptable, the rest of the movie is just kind of outside of your reach for being able to understand or appreciate, because the motivations of every character require you to have an opinion one way or another on the overall. And you can't get it.
And it's a concept that there is no middle ground.
No,
it presents it in a way that you are either here or you're there.
Yeah,
this is how you have to tackle it.
It would have been very easy for this to be a big visual,
like an iRobot,
Matrix spin-off, Brothers movie, Speed Racer crap, and it really, seriously, it could have been that. That's what I think about. It could have been one of all of those hundreds of just crappy big blockbuster popcorn movies. There was more than enough there, and he, again, in his amazing way, is able to take both visual, lighting, sound, music, editing, all of it encompassed in this incredible moral story, which you guys are talking about, combining that with the father-son stuff and make it also this battle of technology. Is it good? Is it bad? Where is it leading us?
Where do we
and remember, when did Minority Report come out?
Was that...
You're talking about early 2000s, if I'm not mistaken?
I think it was 2002, 2003.
I mean,
it was right after AI, wasn't it?
Yes, and I think
so.
It's incredible to think about.
You guys complain that I'm always on my phone.
Well, no, you can do it for this. Yeah. When you go back and look at when Minority Report came out, again, something else that I think we haven't talked about yet with Spielberg is he's always ahead of the game.
Yeah, because the thing is...
2002.
That's
right.
Yeah, so the thing is that while that movie tonally felt very appropriate for a post 9/11 world.
Yes.
And we don't talk about politics on here usually at all.
Mainly because they're wrong and I'm right, but what are you going to do?
Well,
it's okay. It's okay. You guys,
it's a whole different can of worms that we don't want to open up that whole. But tonally, the movie felt very appropriate for post 9/11.
The world that we were living.
But
especially with everything,
even considering that the production of that movie started pre 9/11, but if you look at it as a total package now, it would fit in perfectly in today's society with the political issues that we're dealing with now, with the social issues that we're dealing with now. It would, you can go back and look at it now, and it would feel like this should be something that could easily come out tomorrow and be perfectly in place for what people would feel like they could connect to.
And I mean, this is going to be one of those films that you could go back and watch tomorrow, 10 years from now, and it would still probably have a relevance in terms of, like you said, what the world looks like.
And he's so ahead of the curve. He's always, that's one of the things he does. You can go back and watch Spielberg movies, and they seem to age, for the most part, extremely well.
Yeah. There's a bit more CGI than his norm, but even then, stylistically, it still fits.
And, he got this one with Tom Cruise right and not the other one.
Well, yeah. Another movie that we will avoid on this list. It didn't even make our honorable mentions.
I feel like David has a different opinion.
No. They're talking about War of the Worlds, and I think he was doing an homage in that, and a film where he was trying to be respectful to a genre and to a different time and things. And again,
but that one just didn't work out well.
I don't think it worked out that well, but again, there's moments, there's scenes, there's things in there that are pretty powerful and awesome, and stuff that only Spielberg can pull off.
There's the same thing in Michael Bay movies, but we don't talk about those.
We will be, though. He's on our list.
No, we're not. Are we really?
Michael Bay is on our list for Know Your Directors.
I will definitely be watching them when they do that.
So you're doing that one. You're doing that one solo, right?
I love that.
But that and Snyder, we've already agreed there will be drinking. So.
Okay. All right. Okay.
I'm really tuning in for that one.
There will be drinking. So, yeah. But
I liked Bad Boys.
I have no problem with Bad Boys. Actually, Bad Boys 2, honestly, is one of my guilty pleasure action flicks.
There you go.
I genuinely enjoyed number 2.
I hated The Rock.
I know, you've got major problems.
Really?
Yeah, you have problems. You can't hate The Rock. Anybody who hates The Rock, just move over there.
Even with Cage.
It's got Nick Cage, and I don't like it. Think about that for a second.
Jeez, okay. Yeah. Picky, man. Yeah. Okay, so do we have anything else that we want to say about Minority Report before we move on?
No. Okay. We tackled it pretty well.
So the next number 8 on our list is one that is very... Yeah, I know.
Okay.
Number 8 on our list is one that is very...
It's a tough
movie. You want to talk about something that was so artistically well done. Munich.
Yeah.
Munich, oh my gosh.
Something just happened.
That would be camera number 2 needs to be
reset.
All
right, I'll take over from here then. All right. So
camera number 2 died. Yay!
Where do we begin with Munich, man? So artistically, yes, it's a beautifully shot movie. It's a very... God. You want to take over, David?
Yeah, I can't. I mean, Munich is one of my favorite Spielberg movies of all time.
It's a tough movie.
I like to look at Munich as, in a way, and this is going to be probably interesting to you guys, I look at it as the third of 3 movies. I look at the first one is
I
know I know where you're going.
Tell me where I'm going. The first would be Schindler's List.
Okay.
The second would be Private Ryan. And in many ways, I feel like Munich is the finality of that trilogy.
Right.
Because I think that you see the Holocaust, and you see this persecution and this group going on. You see the message of, okay, now the Jews have been persecuted. It's very personal to Spielberg, and they're now fleeing. And then you see, and they're supposed to be able to go to this place where they find safe and freedom and to start this stuff, and they're not going to be persecuted anymore. They'll always have a place to go. Then you have Saving Private Ryan. It shows you how this freedom, how this liberation, how this war was fought to free us all from the possibility of that. And then you get to Munich, and Munich is now, we're 20 to 30 years later, and you've got this incredible okay, now you have this state of Israel. Now you have this place that Jews are supposed to be able to go and have freedom in. And now, oh, but by the way, the whole Palestinian conflict with them, and what do you do and how do you deal with this? And it all comes full circle, because what you realize is so many of the political questions that were there in the beginning are still there when you get back to Munich. And Munich, of course, ends with the shot of the towers and the terrorism that still exists, and how none of us, how we're still having these same battles and fights today. And what blows me away about Munich is, like you guys were talking about, first of all, the way he takes what basically is a 60s, 70s way of shooting film, the style, the way he did it with the costumes and the cars and the lighting and taking you through the streets and all these different things. It's so well done. It's so Spielberg in so many ways, and he can recreate that. But then you add into that, again, holy cow, the pacing of the film. Oh my gosh, the moral questions that come up. Wow, the music and the tone and the setting for everything he does. And then you basically have one of Spielberg's most controversial films, because he, as a Jewish man, decides with Tony Kushner, who had said some anti-Zionist stuff, and we don't have to get into all the political stuff, but the Vengeance book that Munich is based on by George Jonas that I read, that does not necessarily take what lots of people like, which is a pro one way or the other stance, and likes to look at both sides as having fault. Spielberg dives into that with Kushner, and they refuse. And there's that great scene in Munich where Avner, Eric Bana's character, is talking to the Palestinian character, and he doesn't realize he's Mossad and Israeli, and they're a safe house, and they're in this safe house together, and they've no idea, and they have this whole ideological conversation about, you can't win. And he says, we have lots of children, and the masses are going to keep on coming up. And it's, to me, it is Spielberg growing up. It is Spielberg finding his maturity to say, I don't pretend to have all the answers for you as a film director. I am presenting to you the questions, the sides, and you yourself have to figure out. And he keeps that tone throughout the movie where, again, what's the last scene? Avner and Jeffrey Rush, Eric Bana and Jeffrey Rush's characters saying, come on, I think his name, it's escaping me, and I love them. Jeffrey Rush's character, he says, come, Chaim, I think it is, or it's something like that. And he says, come break bread with me. Isn't it say somewhere, stranger and whatever? And he says, no, I can't. Because Avner refuses to come back to Israel. He's lost his luster for that. And he's like, I'm not going with you. And then again, the shot of the towers at the end, which is, have we solved anything? Did we do anything? All this. It's so brilliant, but I think Spielberg's maturity in this movie, and again, the tie-in to those other films that he has made, there is a connection. There is a universe that I think he was trying to bind together in that, which is very fascinating. No. I've shared that view is shared by a lot of people that shows you that this is all we've been building. This is all we've been fighting. This is all we've been doing. Wait, you're telling me you still don't have the answers? No. I don't have the answers, and I don't profess to have the answers, and none of us really have the answers. We can have opinions, but we don't have the answers, and I love that about Spielberg in this movie. I love that.
I think... Oh, no, go ahead.
So one of the more unique elements of Munich, especially when you compare it to every one of his other films, is something that he is so well known for is the soundtrack. That every scene, the emotion has a tendency to be dictated by the score. Munich is one of the few examples that you can find where the emotion of the scene is not dictated by the score so much as the overall sound design. The sound design is actually probably more important in this film than any other film of his, simply because he chooses to have so many more musically quiet scenes in it. So you have to be able to have context of, okay, so you have this the scene that starts off being shot focused on the balcony, but you're hearing the sounds of the street.
One of the great
and
scenes
the
ever shot.
camera is coming back, and all of a sudden you start to realize that the sounds of the street and the sounds of people talking are on the street and in the car in front of the building, and then you get to see, oh, that's the real focus of the scene. Or when they are...
And it's all from Avner's point of view as he's seen it happen in front of him, from the phone booth, as he's ringing the phone, doing the whole thing of, oh my God, like, it's crazy. He puts you in the movie.
No, I was thinking actually of the night scene.
You're thinking of the scene with the couple next door.
Yeah.
Oh, I was thinking of the little girl scene.
And that's the other one, though, where he's going back and forth between the two, the inside of the building with the girl and the outside.
Because he has that, too, with the street and the cars. He mimics that. Yeah, he does that twice.
And you're always hearing the opposite of what you're actually looking at from the sound, so that you're getting context for what the whole picture is, and you're never lost in what's going on. You're never following the girl and forget about the danger. You're never watching the guys in the car and forgetting about the girl. It's always connected. And even some of the more subtle scenes of just them sitting in a room together talking is just so subtle and subdued, and you don't have that score to really push and lead the audience. You're forced to actually pay attention to the conversation. You're forced to pay attention to the actual mood of the scene, and it makes such a difference.
It's a topic that's so heavy, and the way that he presents it too was so brilliant. In that, like you said, he wasn't a guy that was presenting it like, I know the answer of what's morally right and what's morally wrong between what these men did and everything like that. It was, this is what I'm putting out there. You guys need to figure it out.
People got very angry at him for doing that and not taking a stance.
But it was absolutely brilliant the way he's like, I am telling the story of what happened. It's up to y'all to determine whether or not this was the right thing or was not the right thing.
And what you're talking about, Brad, is so true. He builds those scenes with just the pace and the suspense, and it is all just done, like you said, through natural sound and these camera shots and these it's brilliant, and it's something that we've seen him do in other work and in other films, and it's something that really he is the master of. I mean, he is, and he shows you again, right? Back to my initial thing of what I try to tell people when he's my favorite director. He can do it in so many different ways. There is not a Spielberg style. There is a Spielberg style, but he is not handcuffed to it.
Yes, and if you have not seen our video on our Know Your Director video for Steven Spielberg, to be able to understand what the Spielberg style is, definitely worth going to check out, because we do actually talk a lot more in depth there about these are the interconnecting things that make the Spielberg's cinematic feel. These are the elements of his cinematography that are kind of universal. And while he may have certain changes for certain movies or certain genres, there are very specific elements that will be interconnected across the board almost religiously for him. So yeah, definitely go check that out, but not now. Finish this and then go check it out. But yeah, in fact, another movie, the number 2 movie on our list was another one where sound design over score was a very important thing. But to move on to our number 7, Catch Me If You Can. So, Catch Me If You Can, obviously one of Leonardo DiCaprio's best films.
Should have got the Oscar, but
I mean, the chemistry between him and Tom Hanks was just incredible.
And Christopher Walken. And I mean, it's all just amazing.
And then it comes back to earlier what we were talking about was the casting. Like with Spielberg, it's just, I don't think I've ever watched a Spielberg movie where it was like, no, I don't think that guy was right for that character. I don't think that actress was right. No. Like every time I watch a Spielberg movie, I'm just like, wow. Like, he always gets the best people for the job.
And one of the most fascinating things about Catch Me If You Can was, and I don't know if you guys caught this, I never knew that. Everyone talked about, again, the daddy issues, Spielberg's dad abandoning it. But we find out in the Spielberg documentary, which I never knew, that what he threw into Catch Me If You Can, the part that is not like the book, and it is the movie, what he threw in was in the movie, Christopher Walken, who is Frank Abagnale's father, right? He's Frank Abagnale Sr. His wife takes off with his best friend.
Yeah.
And that is what Spielberg's mother did.
Mm-hmm.
I never knew that.
Huh.
Everybody thought Spielberg's dad was the one who abandoned him. It wasn't.
Huh.
Spielberg's mom took off with Spielberg's dad's best friend, and they went and lived a life together. And the craziest part is that Spielberg's dad remained friends with them. And is still to this day, he has passed on, the stepdad.
Yeah.
Spielberg's dad and mom, they have them in that documentary of Spielberg sitting there together, and he's like, she was still my best friend and I still loved her. And that was a little thing he threw into Catch Me If You Can based on his own childhood, which I had no idea until recently. It's fascinating.
I was completely unaware of that.
That's all in that documentary. And so again, throwing his own daddy's stuff, throwing his stuff in there. Catch Me If You Can, again, man, you talk about just from the opening credits alone.
Yeah. Oh my
the way that he does the credits.
The style of the credits was probably
gosh.
that was probably one of the best parts of the movie that set up expectations for the movie, because it had so much soul of the time period that it was capturing in it, that it automatically sets you up to feel, I already know what I'm supposed to be feeling going into this. I get the time period, I get the context just because of the that opening sequence. And
the music.
Fantastic.
Again, such a simple...
Yeah.
The notes on the piano by John Williams, back at it again, what he does. That movie is so good, and it's like you talked about, the chemistry between Hanks and DiCaprio and Walken and all of that. It's brilliant.
Which, speaking of the casting, if any other director had done this movie, everybody would be talking almost exclusively about the chemistry between DiCaprio and Hanks.
Yep.
And that would be fine. But because all of the other supporting characters were so
good. Amy Adams was so good.
Amy Adams is fantastic.
Martin Sheen is so good.
Amy Adams, with this was relatively early on in her career.
As usual, Spielberg finds them, and the next thing you know, they become superstars after that. It's pretty incredible.
Come on.
We're not even going to get into that. No, Catch Me If You Can. It's a great movie. I love it. And again, like you said, I don't know, as Brad was saying, I don't know. That was one of the first movies where I sat there and I gave DiCaprio credit and said, this guy's pretty good. I wasn't up until that point. I was like, all right, he's done some good things or whatever.
Really?
I really up into that
You're
point.
not a Titanic fan.
I'm a Titanic fan, but I'm not a Leonardo DiCaprio acting in Titanic fan. I feel like there are 100 people that could have played that role, and anyone could have done it. I don't think there was a lot of depth. I don't think there was a lot of range. It's neither.
I see Mike's soul.
I know. Mike knows. Mike knows.
Just hanging out over here, man. Just hanging out.
Never let go, Rose. This is where we first met Jack. I just can't. I can't. There's so much crap in that, and I have respect for Titanic. And I like Titanic, and I get it. But again, for me, What's Eating Gilbert Grape, Catch Me If You Can, were some of the first films where I really saw DiCaprio step out of himself, play something that I wasn't expecting and thought, this guy has got something.
That's part of the brilliance of Spielberg, too, is like, who would have thought to cast DiCaprio in this film? Like, with what he had done before.
Right, exactly. And he has to play such a young kid and go into the stuff. No, not at all. And I think that, again, Spielberg, look, if you love DiCaprio, you got to give Spielberg credit, because without that role, without that range, who knows where DiCaprio's career goes? He could have stared down a whole career of much more blah, wishy-washy, big blockbuster. We're going to go by the way of Will Smith and things like that.
The two big movies that he had to his name before, you had Titanic and you had Romeo and Juliet.
Right.
And if those have been
talk about Romeo and Juliet, man.
If those have been the two main points of context that most other people had for his acting,
aside from What's Eating Gilbert Grape, but people had forgotten that because he was so much younger.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It would have. It very much could have sent his career in a different direction.
Correct. But no, the
Catch Me If You Can was a whole.
I'm about to say the greatness of
turning
Catch Me
point
If
for
You
him.
Can too is the whole how much longer can he get away with it? At what point does he start to get caught? he starts fumbling on this stuff, and then you've got Tom Hanks who's leading the task force that's like right on his heels, and it's
well, and in some ways you're rooting for him to get away,
right, yeah,
which is so fascinating. Right?
It's because he's such a likable person, and like the charisma that you're like, oh, like,
and I already know why you
but
guys love that movie, because he uses one of his aliases, the Flash. I already know why. I'm sure you guys both watched it.
Actually, for me, that was just a side note.
That was
I'm glad that you got that.
I did.
I also found it very unique that so many of the movies of this style, of this genre, this cat and mouse thing, before it, usually took the idea that either you were rooting for the criminal or you were rooting for the cop. Right. You were never rooting for both. And yes. In the end, there was always one of them was clearly the villain. In this movie, there wasn't really a villain. It was the situation that was more villain than any of the characters. The characters, you just kept wanting to follow. You were rooting for it to all just keep going because you enjoyed the dynamics.
The whole night I'm going to have in my head, dun, 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 dun. That's going to be in my head. I mean, that's what they do to you. That's what he does to you. It's a great movie.
So our number was at 6 and is E.T. So E.T. Definitely just what exactly can you say about E.T. that hasn't already been said a million times at this point?
I'll be right here.
1,000,001.
I mean, it's what's interesting is and for you guys, I'm a little older than you guys, but I can tell you that
not by that much.
Here we go. But I can tell you that when I was growing up, E.T. was really. There were, for my parents' generation, it was Wizard of Oz.
Oh, yeah. For,
people that in between that, you'd probably say, they would talk about The Godfather. At least for me as a kid growing up, E.T. was the one. E.T. was the one that everyone... there were 10th anniversary editions and 5-year and 20, and it was, everybody had an E.T. doll.
Okay.
And everybody talked about it. And it became
like every 5 years, Spielberg re-releases
yes,
it.
and it became Spielberg's emblem logo of his company that he started with the bike through, with the E.T. through the moon. And it's one of those films that is so iconic. And it's tough because you go back and watch E.T., and I love E.T.
Yep.
But I will say that I think E.T. might be one of his films that has not aged as well as some of the others.
I think that's fair.
I go back and I am probably more critical about it. Now, it will always go on my top 10 list.
Sure.
If I'm making one of Spielberg, it was always a movie that if it's on television, I stop, I watch it.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm going to do it. But I think that you watch that, you see that, some of the effects blow you away, some of them don't work as much nowadays. Okay. And
so it's the visuals that don't hold up as well.
I think part of the visuals, I think part of the acting is weak at times in this movie. I don't love the mother necessarily. I think Drew Barrymore is very cute. I think the brother's fine. I think Henry Thomas is great.
No. Well, that's the thing. You're not supposed to love the mother, though, because the whole thing with the E.T. is all supposed to be about the kids.
Right,
and that the mother's the only adult that before the end of the movie, you actually get to see her face.
True.
That
I'm just talking about acting.
Are meant to be... kind of ignored or...
I'm talking about acting, though.
Well,
acting,
even then,
whatever.
Acting-wise, she was never meant to be somebody that had a lot to work with.
Right, no, that's true.
So.
It's just, look, E.T. is magical, and there's still moments in it that are magical.
Sure.
And like I said, I have incredible respect for it. I do think, though, that as Spielberg continued to work, and he continued to show us his stuff, I think that you can go to the movies that he did before E.T. Mm-hmm. And those films have stood the test of time in a better way. Not to say that E.T. is still not great, but I don't believe, let's put it this way. I can sit down and show just about any of my nephews and nieces Jaws.
Mm-hmm.
I can sit down and show just about any of my nephews and nieces Raiders of the Lost Ark, and they will see the brilliance in it and be captivated by it. When I sit down and show them E.T., I think they like it. I think they think it's fun and it's entertaining, but I don't think they can understand the phenomenon of what that movie caused because of the movies that you've had come after it. When you look at this generation's Harry Potter.
Okay.
Or you know what I mean? When you look at, because E.T. was Harry Potter. E.T. was the Wizard of Oz to that generation. E.T. was the end all and be all.
Yeah.
That's what kids, it was E.T. I mean, Atari went under because of it in many ways. We don't have to go into now. But it's
well, yeah, but to be fair, a lot of that
Phil full
No,
was on Atari.
Oh, I know, but I'm saying that is, I mean, but E.T. was built around that because of what it was in the iconic standpoint.
So E.T. was also, I think, I don't know if you'll agree with this, but for me, it was the first Spielberg film, I think, that really hit me emotionally.
Oh, without a doubt.
Like, that just really was trying to just absolutely tear your heart out.
out.
Just show it to you.
But see, for me, Close
Temple of Doom
Encounters
stuff.
did a lot of that.
Yeah.
Close Encounters did a lot. That was great, Mike. That was very good.
Nice.
Close Encounters did a lot of that, though. Close Encounters had that emotion. But look, E.T. is an amazing. That's just my little commentary and perspective of that. When I go back and watch E.T., while I still love it, I go visually and some of the stuff.
Sure.
I'm like, I just don't know if it stands. I don't know. That's just my thought.
Interesting.
One of the only Spielberg movies I feel that way about. Still love it. Still love it. Still better than a lot of movies this guy likes. Anyway.
Wow.
Especially Green Hornet. Or Lantern. Either one. Either of the Green movies.
Either of the Green movies?
Wait, are you a Green Hornet fan?
Had its moments.
Oh my god, Mike can make fun of for Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. This guy's talking about Green Hornet.
Yeah, but I mean, you go into that movie knowing what you're getting.
Yeah, I just see, holding it to a different standard. See, that was my point. Was just the defense rests.
And I'm sure I can't go into great detail about it, but there was a fantastic South Park episode that was done that tackled what they did to Indiana Jones.
I'm sure. I'm just pointing out that was my
let's
point.
not go
Move
into
on.
detail.
We got to get through our list.
Okay, so number 5 was Jurassic Park, and this is actually one that I have to argue the placement simply because it was my number 1 on my list.
That's because you have terrible choice and taste.
Wow,
very interesting. So I'm fascinated, Brad. Why number 1?
So for me,
And why not Jurassic World at number 1?
I do like Jurassic.
Oh,
but that's it. Let's just stop there.
Or 1941.
There is a place for love for 1941.
I actually really did like that.
Yes.
So for me, Jurassic Park was number 1, or should have been, because it redefined the special effects side of cinema. It was a movie that, like Star Wars before it, if it hadn't come around, there would be so many movies that we have now that could not have been made because of the technical advancements that Jurassic Park was responsible for. And because of those technical advancements, even though some of the CGI doesn't hold up as well over time, all of the animatronics do. And it made it feel so tangible. It made it feel so real. And it's just, it had, while you can never say that the acting was, Oscar worthy. You can never say that the story was Oscar worthy. You can always say that it was a movie that redefined the technical side of cinema, and it was a movie that redefined, honestly, the science fiction genre because of the things that they were able to do with the story and be able to prove that you could do and do well that were previously considered to be relegated to the cheesy B-movie stuff.
Sure.
And through this movie, Spielberg proved that you could make an A-list movie and do it well with all those elements and not fall back into that B-movie kitsch.
Well, it was very much science fiction based on science fact with the way that they went about it. Like you walked into or you walked out of it like, yeah, it's a pretty realistic way that they actually could have done it. But like you said, the special effects are what really drive it home. The fact that they made like a 20-foot tall T-Rex. And they're controlling it during that iconic scene of where she's got the light on in the car and it kind of goes down there and you just see the eye dilate. Like that's an actual animal. It's like one of the great scenes. And then you've got a giant robot T-Rex ripping a car up and everything like that. And you're looking at it, you're like, this looks pretty damn real. Like, this is absolutely incredible. I mean, and then you find out that, oh yeah, they made a 20-foot tall T-Rex and that it kept malfunctioning while they were trying to do the shooting because of all the rain and everything like that. Like very much what he did with an earlier movie of his that's coming up here.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
a couple of films, but
you want to talk about,
but him being so ahead of the curve of like where everybody's going all digital. Yeah. He's like, no. Let's take a step back. We're going to try to make this look as real as possible by making something tangible.
And you want to talk about part of the Spielberg style. We talked about before his reliance on facial expressions to be able to promote the emotion of the scene, and this movie so much just pulls that in every chance it gets. But more importantly, it does what has been deemed the Spielberg shot of the slow zoom in on the face before showing what they're reacting to, and really making sure that it is emphasizing as much as possible the emotions of the characters, the emotions of the actors.
Plus, like how many iconic shots are in that movie?
I mean, the
objects in the mirror are closer than they appear. He replicates getting it with the T-Rex in the mirror as the Jeep's pulling away, and the T-Rex is closing
the cup of water
from the cup of water with the little imprint, the footprint, and the water
the
again.
Zoom in on the eye when the light hits it, and you see just
before that, the zoom in on everybody in the car when they first get to the park, before you even see the dinosaurs to begin with. It's just, I mean, you want to talk about one of the best reveals in cinematic history. That is the way to do a visual reveal.
And I know it's not
scene
and I know it's not his top 10, but John Williams again.
No,
the score too, where especially with the reveal and then the score comes in and
of all of his movies. I mean, of all of his movies, Jurassic Park to me is the perfect showcase of a John Williams work. In that, if it hadn't been for John Williams' work, half of the movie could not be as well tied together as it was, because it felt like John Williams' score was. It was the lifeblood of the scenes that just kept swelling the emotion just as much as the actual actors and their emotional expressions.
I also think that, look, we're talking about the fact that people had tried. Spielberg brought dinosaurs back to life. Mm-hmm. And he brought, the big thing in the movie, 65 million years apart, humans and the man takes dinosaurs, puts them on the screen. Mm-hmm. This wasn't the cheesiness of the original Godzilla movies and those monster movies. This wasn't the silliness of, even though I love those movies, this wasn't the silliness of those old monster movies and the old original film stuff with the attacking the this and the that, or, whatever you want, it came from another world or any of these other things. It's Lost World, the original Lost World. He creates it and he makes it real and you believe. There's never a moment, and the man made this movie in 1992, 93 is when it came out, right? 90, it's right around, I think
it was 91.
Is it 91? Somewhere around there. I know it was the summer. I thought it was 92 or 93, but I could be wrong.
93 is the same year as Schindler's List.
Yeah, it's the same year as Schindler's List. It's the summer of Schindler's List, but I just, you watch it now, 25 years later.
And it holds up.
And the dinosaurs look just as real. Like you were talking about that you watch it on 4K.
And it's still,
I've never seen it.
There are certain
4K.
There are certain elements of the CG that it stands out, but all of the animatronics, even in 4K, really feel so real. And you don't see it in 4K. Just that really high def image and say, oh yeah, no, that's a puppet. No, you don't feel that. You feel it.
Nope.
Oh crap!
They're about to get mauled to death by that big ass dinosaur.
Yeah, that dinosaur is about to eat them. That guy actually just got killed by that dinosaur. You don't feel like, oh, that was just a really cool puppet.
And let me go a step further, which is this is one of Spielberg's most unique qualities. And I would challenge either of you to find me another director that has done it as many times as he has. And this is why I have a lot of hope for tomorrow night, even though I'm still very nervous. He has taken Spielberg multiple books that I love
and translated them.
That I went into thinking there's no way.
Okay.
Like there's no way. Like I am so nervous. I'm so worried. I'm so concerned. I love Jurassic Park, the book by Michael Crichton.
Yeah.
I think you can argue any day of the week Spielberg's piece of art is better than Crichton's book when you look at the full picture.
Well, and
I love it.
Crichton
He does
involved.
correct.
No.
And he does an amazing job, Spielberg. Right, Crichton's involved. And he does an amazing job of connecting and putting what you read on paper onto the screen almost the way you envisioned it, which is crazy to think about. And then he goes a step further. Remember, in the Crichton book, the whole connection with the birds was not there. Spielberg did that from the beginning of the movie to the end shot with the whole connection with the birds that he comes back to in the movie.
Yeah.
And he did the same thing with another movie we're going to talk about in a little bit where I think he far surpassed the book.
Oh, yeah.
And he's done it multiple times.
Yep.
That is so hard. Our whole lives we grew up with what? Not as good as the book. It's just not as good as the book. It'll never be as good as the book in our imagination. And the book's better, the book's better, the book's better.
Yep.
I argue with you, he's one of the few directors in the world that you could make the reverse argument, or at the very least say,
at least
the
it's
movie
on
was
par.
as good as the book.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
that's really impressive.
Easy.
And what a quality. Like, that's one of the biggest compliments I could ever give to Spielberg.
So on the technical side of this, there are 4 movies to me that, for modern movies, were the defining moments where cinematic technology had such significant jumps that it redefined what was possible in movies. The first one was the original Star Wars. The second one was, I believe this came out before Jurassic Park, but you kind of have to take the 2 movies together, Labyrinth and Dark Crystal. Because of the advancements in practical effects with puppetry that they were able to do. The third one was Jurassic Park, and the fourth one was Avatar. Those 4 movies in the realm of modern cinema were the 4 defining moments that the technology that the technology behind cinema advanced at such a significant amount for the sake of that one movie that no matter what your opinion of those individual movies, cinema as a whole would not be the same without
And I'd
them.
probably throw in T2 on that because of the sound.
The sound and CGI.
What happened with the CGI and the sound thing after that changed the world
Which came out
for a long time.
year after this, didn't it? Wasn't T2 94?
No. T2 was 92 or 91, I believe.
I don't think it was that.
I thought it was earlier than Jurassic.
I thought it was around.
It was earlier.
No, T2 was before Jurassic.
It was earlier.
It was definitely it was definitely before Jurassic. I'm almost 100% sure. I feel like T2 might have even been 91.
I don't think it was that early.
About it. I feel like T2 was 91 or 92. It definitely was before Jurassic.
It was early.
I have no doubt it was before Jurassic.
It was 91.
91. That's what I thought.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's why I would throw T2 in there also. But you're completely on the right path. And I've never disagreed with Avatar's technological advances, as I think I like the way Brad put it. Regardless of how you feel about those movies,
I have no
you have to
problem.
acknowledge the visual stuff and the.
I have no
technical
problem
stuff.
acknowledging that Avatar is essentially just a really, really, really expensive remake of Ferngully. I have no problem
Or
acknowledging
Smurfs,
that.
or Dances with Smurfs, as I like to say. Any one of those. It is an unoriginal piece of
Okay, I actually
visual
liked-
masterpiece, but unoriginal.
I liked it for a lot of reasons.
Okay.
I will never say that it is one of the best movies in cinema, but I will say that it is the most one of the most visually stunning.
I agree.
And so to move on to our number 4, we are almost in our top 3.
Yes.
So number 4, we've already touched on quite a bit before, so we can probably shoot through this a little bit quicker.
Yeah, we can.
Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yes. So you're ready for me to tell you why I think that Raiders of the Lost Ark is so. Raiders of the Lost Ark, again, He took this serial, watch a movie every week cliffhanger kind of idea, this simple idea of this archaeologist. He, from the opening moment of the Paramount mountain that he turns into the scene of where they are with the mountain, to the boulder, to the statue scene with him and the deal going down. Again, what you focused on, the zoom in shot and the tension building and John Williams music stuff and everything. There is just so much. You can go on and on and on in that film, from the scene, even a great visual scene that is one of my favorite goofy, silly scenes, where he is speaking to the class when he's back at the university, and the girls with "I love you" on her eye. That is so genius. And I gotta tell you,
I love it. I love that scene.
It's brilliant, more visual brilliance.
Yeah.
And again, a scene that I think gets forgotten about, where the music and the lighting and the tone, where he's sitting there talking to these guys about the history of the Ark, and your heart is racing as he says, and what is that behind him? Thunder, lightning, the power of God. Dun, dun, dun. The first time you hear that, it's so genius. And you can go on and on and on and on and on, from the submarine scene to the scene, of course, with the snakes, to the Ark itself, to the, I mean,
the plane fight,
the Staff of Ra.
Oh, sorry, the fight in front of the plane.
Wait a minute. The flight, the in front of the plane, to the plane with the red line on the map. That's a different way of taking you to the different locations of where they are, and how we see nowadays. It's just as simple as, you show the thing with Paris, 19 whatever, this whatever.
There's a much more creative transition. A method of transition that before
without CGI,
had been reserved for more cartoons than.
Look, I will tell you right now that Raiders was right underneath Last Crusade for me,
and that's
for me. Last Crusade hits a little bit closer to home in terms of the source material and what they're talking about.
And that I could understand. And as a Jewish person, Raiders of the Lost Ark for me is like, holy cow. And he stands, and you may or may not know this, but my dad, who's a rabbi, you know that, but I was going to say my dad, who's a rabbi, talks about the priest's scene that they set up with the way they're carrying it and the prayers he's saying, and it is all accurate. That is all the actual priestly ceremony. I mean, Spielberg did his research, and Kasdan and Lucas and everything, but it's just genius. It's genius
even all the
from
way
the
down
first
to,
moment, from the first shot to the amazing last shot.
That's what I was just about to get to.
I mean, it's everything from start to finish in that film, and then he keeps his humor.
Even
the scene with the hanger and the Nazi walking in with the trench coat and what is he about to do to us? And he hangs up his coat on that thing.
And then just very casually sits down and starts talking.
Brilliant.
Even if there is one scene of special effects at the end of the movie that feels like it belongs more in Army of Darkness than it does in Steven Spielberg.
One of the greatest. It's faces
iconic.
melting off the Nazis.
But how about the fact that there are 50 scenes like that in that film? How about the fact that there are memorable scene after memorable scene after memorable scene, even a scene as simple as throwing the date up into the air, the poisonous date, with the fan circulating, the catch, and the monkey being at bad dates. It's genius stuff.
And I'll do you one even better. The ending, where they're sitting there talking, and he's like, this is an item that needs to be preserved and everything like that. Where is it? He's like, who's it being handled by? And the guy just says top men. He's like top men.
The writing,
just that warehouse of all of that crap,
all of the things,
and they seal it up, and they're just wheeling it down.
And it's all there, and that's why, Mike. That's why I sit there and I tell you, I love Last Crusade. I think it's great. But when this movie, you have to take it in chronological order. You have to take what had ever come out at that moment. Nothing like that existed.
I think we've.
And I don't think it's. And I got to tell you something. and including last, I don't think it's ever been duplicated. And I don't think it's ever been done as complete. And the biggest thing I told you about this, well, you went and saw it with me, right? The kids who did the I don't know.
Documentary.
Did you ever see, Brad?
Yeah.
But did you ever actually see, I own it, you guys have to see it. So for those who don't know it, there were these two kids and a group of kids did a shot-for-shot remake of Raiders of the Lost Ark from over a 6 to 7 year period over their summers. And it's amazing. And I have the actual movie. Not the documentary. I have the actual film.
If you bought the documentary,
you got the footage with it. And I challenge everyone. The documentary is called The Greatest Fan Film Ever Made. And Spielberg is quoted because they got to show it to Spielberg as saying, this is the greatest flattery and honor that anyone could have ever done.
Oh, yeah.
The fact that was done by these kids shows you in itself where this historically, the context of this movie holds up.
My reason for including Raiders and not Last Crusade for my personal list.
That's because you're an awful person, yes.
Well, no, was because it may seem slightly contradictory to some people, but there was a certain element of, I mean, as many brilliant shots and as brilliant as the cinematography was in the movie, there were certain shots within the movie that felt a little bit rougher in Raiders compared to Last Crusade, where Last Crusade just felt like, oh, clearly there's been a lot of experiences happen in between. Yeah. They've learned how to smooth out certain transitions, certain how to capture certain bits of action. But for me, that slightly more raw feel in Raiders actually makes it more appropriate for the genre because it feels more within context for the genre that they were paying homage to.
Similar conversation. Look, no, but he stands by it because the last time I was here with you guys, we talked about it and I said one of the reasons for me that I put Army of Darkness over Evil Dead was my issues with some of the graininess, some of the dark lighting and everything. And your point was, but that was the original, that gave it some of that. And I think that's it. So it's good that, so it's not contradictory to where you come from on those points and consistently doing that. And I don't disagree with what he's saying, but I also think that if you look, I think for you, what you said about Indiana Jones and Last Crusade hitting a personal note with you has a lot to do with it, just like Raiders has a lot to do with me. But I also think if you look at the film from start to finish as a complete deal, I love Last Crusade. I could definitely find a couple scenes that I would cut in that. I would be very hard-pressed to find a scene that I can cut in Raiders. And when I look at perfect movies, and we're going to get to something in a moment, when I challenge, I always say that. Could I have cut, when I'm really like holding things to the highest standard, can I find 30 seconds? Can I find 2 minutes? Can I find, did he really? It is very hard to cut Raiders. It is very hard to find stuff I would have cut in Raiders. It's difficult. Incredibly difficult. No. And we didn't even talk about the scene with the knife and all the sort of thing and the gun. I mean, there's so many.
Oh, no.
There's so much story. The story behind that scene's great.
Yeah.
That they had gone out drinking the night before. You know this?
I don't.
No, it wasn't.
He was sick. He was sick. He was so sick that
Harrison was sick.
They were supposed to have this
sick with it was like 103 degree fever or something like that. He could barely stand up, and so he was supposed to be going in with just the same kind of intricate choreography.
Right.
And when the actual day of shooting came,
he literally, the guy does all of the stuff or whatever, and Harrison just, off the top of his head, pulls it out, shoots him, and that's why he has that look of just so drained and so exhausted.
That's genius.
He's got a guy that's running a fever that's been doing all of this stuff.
And as soon as the scene was done, they immediately had him rushed back to get medical care.
And the scenes with the baskets and I mean, it's just, that movie has so much. It has so much.
So,
it doesn't have a 400-year-old knight saying.
That's my least favorite part of that movie.
But it's got one of the great lines.
It does. It does.
He chose
poorly. You have chosen wisely. No, all of that is great, but I'm sorry, the payoff does not, it's not the Ark of the Covenant being opened. It just isn't. It just isn't.
From the Holy Grail, man.
I know, man.
So, our number 3 pick was Jaws.
She talks in her sleep.
So, I believe, wasn't Jaws your number 1, David?
Yes. Yes. So
I had it, I think, at number 3 or number 4.
Yes, you had number 3.
And I never, and Mike knows this, in my office, there is a poster of Jaws that my dear friend Ariel Barreto, who hopefully watches, gave to me as a wedding present. It's signed by the whole cast. And the coolest thing about why I love that
signed by
poster
the whole cast.
is it's not just signed by the whole cast, it's also signed by John Williams and Peter Benchley, who wrote the novel.
Yep.
Wow.
It's so don't break in and steal that thing. It's one of my most prized possessions.
I've already got dibs on it.
But does it have Spielberg's signature?
Yes. Yeah, it has everyone. Oh, it has everyone.
I get
it has
that.
everyone.
That's left to me in the will, right?
That's right. It has everyone.
Wow.
So for me, again, look, this is, I don't ever like talking about what is, and the funny thing is credit to my brother, because my friend Ariel, when he asked my brother, he said, look, I know David loves Spielberg. I know it's his favorite director of all time. What movie is his favorite? And my brother said to him, you can't go wrong with what you're talking about. But he says, but I think I'd go with Jaws. And for me, it always goes back to Jaws. And this is, I don't sit there and compare. I hate comparing Spielberg movies to each other on what's better or what's not. And we're not really doing that. We're doing a little bit of that. This is where I stand by with Jaws. First of all, it really is his third film. Mm-hmm. You have Dune, which was made for TV. You have Sugarland Express, and then you have Jaws. Mm-hmm. Once you get into the making of the nightmare that it was, the fact that the man will never again film in water and has never done it again because of this movie, the fact that they took such a chance on him, the fact that he had no shark for 6 months and that he had to basically change what he did and make it work without showing it, and it's fearful of what's below you. Mm-hmm. The fact that I got into swimming pools and I was still worried that a shark was going to come and kill me. Forget about being in the ocean. In my swimming pool, I, as a kid, was scared and terrified that a shark was going to come and get me, and that is totally true and real.
My dad, who grew up in California when the movie came out.
Yes.
Absolutely.
You can't. In the ocean, that's what, and the fact that, again, so that's the aura, that's the personality and the music, that it's simple, that all of Jaws was represented was dun 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 dun. That described you that the shark was there. That was it. With no fin, with no nothing.
You didn't see anything.
No, you didn't. You saw the fin about halfway through. Then you finally see the shark in the scene where he gets the guy in the boat and he takes his leg off, that infamous scene of the leg, and then at the end you finally see it with everything. But so just going into that mold of that movie, here's the other thing I would challenge you on. First of all, it's better than the book. If you've ever read the book Jaws, I don't know if you ever have.
No.
It'll throw you for a loop, because in the book, Brody's wife has a sexual relationship and an affair with Richard Dreyfuss's character, which is nowhere to be found in the book, by the way, in Benchley's thing. And the movie so surpasses Benchley's novel that I loved. But here's what I would challenge you to find for me in any other film. If we get away from all of the visual and the technical and all those things, the barrels, that's the way he turned what had to keep the shark afloat into a suspenseful way of using this of, keep down the barrels, and that's how, it's so genius. But here's what I challenge you to do. Find me another film that has 3 actors, and I don't mean men or women, whatever, just in any movie, actors, where I challenge you to find me who the lead is. You don't. They are all 3 equally represented. They are all 3 equally interesting and fascinating characters. And by the end of it, you're not really sure, is Chief Brody the star? Is Hooper the star? And this guy trying to find his way with this guy who's, or is Shaw the old Ahab character? Which one of them is really the main actor? And you go to the poster I have, and they are all 3 equally partnered up on the marquee. That, to me, is so fascinating in Jaws, that you have this story. The fact that Spielberg, before he had ever shot anything, had the USS Indianapolis scene scribbled down with them comparing scars to each other. That is nowhere to be found in Benchley's book. Nowhere in Benchley's book. That is his thing. It's genius.
That might be the best scene in that entire film.
The best scene in the entire film. It could be one of the great scenes of all time, them comparing the scars to each other. And
he's where'd you get that one? And he says, yeah.
And he's joking about it. Oh, let me guess, Mom, the tattoo and the laughter. And they're saying, I'm tired and I want to go to bed. And it's so brilliant. And again, to your points of lighting, Jaws is one of the few movies where Spielberg doesn't have that lighting.
Yep.
And he doesn't have any of that.
Light.
It's all natural light, and it shows you this guy is masterful when you go back. And I challenge anyone to go back and watch Jaws today, not be freaked out, not see the brilliance in it.
Yep.
And it has, and it stood the test of
a couple
time.
of years ago, they did AMC did their re-release in theaters where they'll do like the limited, they'll do like a couple day,
Right.
Yep.
Me and my dad went and saw it.
It's as good as it ever was, and it's not because of any fancy film.
No.
It's the story, it's the music, it's everything. And let's not forget, Jaws at the time, in many ways, created the summer blockbuster, the popcorn blockbuster.
No, not in many ways. It did.
It did.
There was no concept of a summer blockbuster before.
And I would argue
Jaws.
that this is just as much a horror movie as it is anything else.
It's got a lot of horror in it.
Well, so that's actually something very interesting that I had. I only recently heard somebody point that out.
It's very much a horror movie.
It was when I used to see this in the rental.
Spielberg has a lot of his movies that are really more of a horror movie than whatever genre they're actually being billed as, and he is proof, and it works out pretty consistently that it is the directors that understand the way of telling and showing a horror movie and that kind of story that end up doing well with the big blockbuster sets, because the set pieces that are necessary for the big blockbuster films, the amount of just sheer visual content that you have to juggle to do it, is the exact same concepts that you have to deal with as a horror director. And most directors that have never dabbled in horror before usually have trouble dealing with the blockbusters. But Spielberg, with Jaws being one of the most prominent of his movies, that was a horror movie that turned into a blockbuster. It just goes to set the bar of explanation that, yeah, this is why horror directors do so well with blockbusters. That's why Sam Raimi did so well with the Spider-Man movies. And in fact, Spider-Man 2 especially, the amount that you can see, in particular in the fight scenes between Spider-Man and Doc Ock, very much pull from elements of how he balanced out shots in his other horror movies. And so it's the perfect reason why Jaws worked.
And when I used to walk through the aisle of Blockbuster Video, Jaws used to be in the horror section.
Yeah.
It was in the horror section. It was not in the action adventure section. It was in the horror section. And again, I can
say it fitting right next to Cujo, easily.
There you go. And I always just go, and then again, once you go back and you find out the history of how difficult the set was and the filming, and that they did it in actual salt water out of Martha's Vineyard, which is so insane on so many levels to think about of how they were able to do it. It's just, to me, that's why it always comes back to Jaws, because that was really what started the summer blockbuster. It's where Spielberg made the name for himself, where he became the household name, and his career could have gone so many different ways.
It was so over budget. It was so long on production that everybody thought that it was going to ruin. Just like Cameron with Titanic, it just kept getting pushed and pushed.
Yep.
Right.
Problem
And
after problem
such a
after
disaster.
problem after problem. And then you drop it and it's like...
And none of them thought it was going to be a hit.
No.
None of them. They all thought this was a disaster. And Spielberg thought that was the last movie he's ever going to be given to
he
be able to direct
to
again.
be done with it by the end.
Oh, 100%. And so that's why and again, I go back to, I challenge anyone to go back and watch Jaws now. It is as good as it ever was, and you can show it to anyone. And again, the father-son issues with his son at the table. There's just so much great stuff there. So much great stuff.
So our top two, these are two movies that are going to be really hard for most people to argue with, because they are consistently brought up by most people when you see big discussions about Spielberg movies. These two movies are the ones that usually are in the top rankings for him in general. So our number two pick is Saving Private Ryan,
which was my number one.
Yes.
Which I think this actually, you know, everybody says Schindler's List. This actually, I think, is probably the most important movie that he ever made. Just because you didn't really have a movie before this that kind of went through the horrors of what the Greatest Generation went through and why they earned the name The Greatest Generation.
Yeah.
Like that opening scene at Normandy where they're just they're getting mowed over and there's body parts flying and he's talking to the guy on the radio and he's just relay this, and then he grabs him and the dude's face is just a crater and it's visually it's a tough, like I vividly remember my dad telling me like, I'm not going to show you this movie till you're older because you won't fully appreciate what it is.
Yeah.
Which I completely understand now.
Oh yeah, no, it was the same for me. I was not allowed to see this when it first came out, only because there was so much in there that I couldn't fully understand at the time.
It wasn't
now I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily the amount of violence or the level of gore that he went to. It was the way he was presenting it as like, this is everything that they went through so that we can, you know, that we were able to get rid of the evil that was on the earth, but more importantly, so that like down the line, we could sit here and present their story in a way that actually did them justice.
Yep.
And this is really the first film, like, you know, there's tons and tons of classic war movies and everything like that, but this is the first film that really took that kind of horrific look at it of like, this was all the awful stuff that they went through. And when you think about it, the story is literally them trying to find one guy so that he can go home.
So
they're there obviously for that. And then after D-Day, they get the story or they get the mission that, hey, you're going to go find Matt Damon's character because his brothers have died in battle. And that was a thing that they never served together anymore because you don't want all of the family to be wiped out. But more importantly, if you're the last surviving member, you're sent back. And the scene where, like, you know, the mom gets all 4 telegrams on the same day. Yeah. And then it's the scene where they're in the office and he's like, she's going to get all 4 telegrams on the same day. And
again, focusing on some of those scenes, the mom looks out the window and sees the car with the
she's
the
doing
scene
the
with the letters
yep.
where you're hearing the voices,
yep.
the voice over and over again, and all the typewriters are going
yep.
again. That's Spielberg, the way he shoots it all.
Yeah,
you were gonna say something.
Well, so the thing that I find very, very interesting is how many people come back to that opening scene on the beach of Normandy. Yeah. And use that as an example of, see, Spielberg uses shaky cam. When the real story behind that is that Spielberg, before making this movie, had seen old news footage from from World War II, and specifically from the invasion of Normandy, and had seen the way that the camera moved and the whole visual, the way it was visually captured by that one camera guy that was running through the battlefield, would get the shots he needed and then duck for cover so that he didn't get shot, and then get back out and do it all over again. And he saw that over and over again from all throughout the war, and was inspired by that and wanted to include that in his movie. And Normandy was just the most prevalent, but if you look all throughout the rest of the movie, it's all throughout there that it feels like the cinematographer, the camera that is showing the viewpoint of the movie might as well be for most of the movie a news photographer coming around with video camera.
You've also got that amazing scene where after the battle's over and everything like that, he just has the shot of the water. And it's running back, all the blood back and forth off the beach.
And full disclosure to you guys, war movies are not my favorite. I appreciate war films,
sure,
but I've never had a love for war films, and I've watched them as a film buff, as you guys know I am. I've seen them, so for me,
Apocalypse Now.
No, that's what I was going to say. No, I love Tora Tora Tora.
Okay,
I love Apocalypse Now is one of my other favorite war films of all time. The first half of Full Metal Jacket, and then goes to hell. Wow. But I watch them, I appreciate them. Okay. At times, I guess I've enjoyed them. This, to me, again, I think you have a man who has made the greatest war film
Yeah.
ever, arguably.
Oh yeah. Easy.
And I think that, again, that shows you that he waited till 1997, 98, I believe it was, and he comes out with Saving Private Ryan. And this is after war movies had been done and redone and done ad nauseum.
Because he understood that he didn't have not necessarily the appreciation, but the maturity required to tackle it.
Well, again, and it's that word maturity again.
Well, and he does it. It was the same thing with the movie that's number one.
Exactly, and he waits. And
because
World War II,
to make that
World
movie.
War II war movies have been. I mean, there may not be a war genre more tackled than World War II.
Oh yeah.
And he makes that, and you sit there and you are like, I get it. Like, I get it.
Yep.
And it's not like it's a movie. It's like you're watching history.
Yep.
And it's like you're there. And that is, there's no point in that first scene where you feel like you're watching a movie.
So,
but on top of that, there's also the characters are so fantastic too.
Oh, the acting. Again, the acting.
And the acting,
the characters, the viewpoint of the movie, that actually, because of the actors and the characters involved, made the viewpoint of the movie so intriguing, because you had the movie that at the very, very beginning, before Normandy, and at the very, very end, was bookended by Private Ryan,
and we
didn't know that's who that was.
And that's one of the toughest.
And it immediately went from Private Ryan to thinking that, oh, that must be Tom Hanks' character, because he immediately after that scene became the viewpoint character of the story. And it wasn't until the very end that
Spoilers, by the way.
all comes back together and you realize, oh, this whole movie has been interconnected. It has not just been some story that we've been watching. We've been watching a circular process that we just didn't realize until the very end. And now that we do, we can see just how well thought out it was, both artistically and through just general framing.
And a cool little tidbit, which is, I don't know if you guys know this, but when they were shooting this,
I think you're about to say what I was going to go to.
About the fact that he kept Damon separate from the rest of the group,
so that he would specifically
for months, and had them go through the training and had them go through the combat. He kept them, and then when they finally see each other, he kept him as an outsider, which kind of brought it all together. And if you, hopefully you've seen the movie. If you haven't, you need to see it.
Like just contempt and disdain that they have on their faces when they see him.
Yes, it's real. It's real. It's real. And again, that's the mastery of Spielberg.
Also, Vin Diesel.
Probably one of the only good roles he's ever been in.
Well, so also Eddie Burns is in this movie. Paul Giamatti's in this movie.
Absolutely. Ted Danson's in the movie.
Ted Danson's
in the movie.
Damon.
No, absolutely. And then and Vin Diesel. No, I stick with this, and I stick with Boiler Room, and that's all.
Barry Pepper, of course.
Yeah, Barry Pepper's great in this movie.
You get me within a mile of Adolf Hitler.
Adam
with this
Goldberg is great in this movie.
Yeah. And of course, that's actually one of the things of in that final fight scene of the movie. It specifically,
the last stand to hold the bridge.
The sniper scene is considered one of the best fight scenes in war movies in cinematic history, and especially it is consistently ranked as one of, if not the best sniper scene in any war film to date, because there is just so much there. I mean, yeah, you can go back and say, oh, if you just want to talk pure sniper scenes, you have some stuff out of the movie about Chris Kyle.
American Sniper.
Yeah. There are scenes out of that as just pure sniper scenes. Yeah. I mean, goes so far above and beyond what you would expect that should have been able to be conveyed emotionally. But this one scene, I mean, as a whole, it had so much emotional weight to it that you just... You were like grabbed onto by that scene, and no matter who was involved, it just kept pulling you back.
What about the scene with the knife?
Yes, that's exactly where I was going. That scene was just so gut wrenching, especially because it went so quiet.
Oh my gosh! And that showed you the real horrors of war and what it was, and then that combined with the feeling. You go back to that with the cowardly way that the guy stands there on the stair. But in the very beginning of it, you always got this image of kids going into battle or people going into battle. They're tough and they're ready and they're going to go conquer the world. And what does he show you? People throwing up in the boat before they hit the beach, people's hands shaking, panicking.
Well, the entire movie, Tom Hanks.
Oh yeah, the Tom Hanks hand. I mean, they are showing, and it's just, you finally got it, and you walk out of there, and not only did you respect those who came before us, you were like, how did anyone not have post-traumatic stress? How did you ever sleep again? And that scene where he fought in the end, where he falls in front of the, tell me I'm a good man, and I remember what I do on it.
That one kills me.
Every
Oh
time.
my gosh!
There's three scenes from that movie that always, I think, kind of hit the message perfectly for what he was trying to tell you. Was that scene at the end? It was the scene where they're sitting there looking through the dog tags with the 101st, and all the surviving are walking past them, and they're all kind of like, because they're all sitting there joking and screwing around.
Put that away.
And the kid comes and he's like, "What the hell are y'all doing?"
Yep.
And then they sit there and they look over and they realize what's up. And then the scene where they're all basically about to mutiny, and Tom Hanks is just like, "What's the pull on me now?"
Yeah, I'm a school teacher.
Yeah, he's like, "I'm just a school teacher." He's like, I don't know this guy. He's like, "But if making sure that this kid gets home safe is what gets me home to my wife and kids."
It's the way Spielberg. He's just masterful. He's masterful in the way he handles those moments.
The conversation between Tom Hanks and Matt Damon, that last conversation that they had, that one right there. I mean, that whole thing.
Where he's talking about the last time that him and his brothers were all together.
Well, the one where
on the bridge.
Okay, where Tom Hanks is telling him that he needs to, he needs to live, that he needs to, live for all of them.
He just looks at me and says, "Earn this."
And also, don't leave out the great Tom Sizemore, by the way. Don't leave out the great Tom Sizemore. What a role he had in that movie.
Of course.
How amazing was Sizemore? It didn't go so well now and after, but he was unbelievable.
But yeah, that scene where you get back to the cemetery, and it's the end of the movie, and he's like, "I think about those words that you told me on the bridge every day."
Yep.
And then you realize who it is that we're finally seeing the movie. I guess
right, through whose eyes.
And then he looks at me and says, "Tell me that I'm a good man. Tell me that I've lived a good life." And you're just like, oh.
Yeah.
And then the final shot where it just goes up to the flag waving, and then it just fades out to nothing.
Yeah. It really changes your perspective on history. Again, like I said, he shows you history.
Yeah.
And he changes it, and that's powerful.
Like I said, are we still live?
I have no idea.
Bro, could you check? Because I'm pretty sure my phone may have just died.
Sweet. But like I said, in terms of movies, I think this is the most important movie that he ever made with respect to everything that happened with the Holocaust and everything like that. But I feel like this is the movie where we finally had somebody tackle what the Greatest Generation went through and why they called the Greatest Generation.
Yeah. Easy. Oh, easy.
I hear you.
So,
we can keep talking.
Yeah, so,
it's over. It's ended. Do you want me to go live?
Actually, we'll just post the rest of this later.
Screw it.
We're good.
Anyway, so our number one movie on the list. Oh my gosh, Schindler's List.
Literally number one on the list. Yep. Schindler's List. Makes sense.
This was. I don't know if there is a movie that he has done that has emotionally wrecked more people than this movie.
Nope.
I think Schindler's List is one that is just, if you get to the end of it and you don't feel personally, emotionally destroyed,
you're an awful human being.
You are a horrible person. There's just something about you that is wrong.
I'm not sorry. No, I'm not sorry. You're a terrible person if you don't feel anything after watching this movie.
Yeah.
This was the first film that I ever recall. I'll never forget it. I went with my older sister when it came out. So you're talking 93, however old I am at that point. I don't even want to go into that. And
a young, spry 35-year-old.
I'm at North Park, in the original North Park 1 and 2 theaters.
Oh, wow.
And it's packed. And the movie ends and the credits roll and people leave in silence.
Yep.
People leave in silence. And that was my first experience in a movie of walking out and no one saying a word.
I watched it.
Walking out.
I watched it at home one night. I think we talked about it. I think we were texting back and forth, and it was late, dude. Like, I started the movie at like 11 o'clock at night, and you were like, "You're not going to sleep tonight."
Yeah, he had never seen it before. How crazy is that?
Like David
He
legit
did not.
started at
I gave him
Yeah.
my copy.
Dear
I gave
Lord.
him it was my DVD. He had never seen the
Lord,
movie
man.
before.
And so David's like, yeah, he's like, "You're not going to sleep tonight." I was like, "Oh, come on, man." He's like, "No." He's like, "Trust me, you're not going to sleep
tonight.
And we get to, because I think, if I remember right, it was 2 discs, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's 2 discs. So
yeah.
I get through the first one, and I'm just sitting there thinking, like, do I want to finish this right now? Like, and then I kind of was like, no, like
You need to.
I need to.
Yeah.
So I pop it in there.
That's not a movie
And
that you
then-
start and stop and come back
Dude,
to.
like I got to the end and I was just like I didn't know how to react. Like I'm literally just kind of sitting there on my couch, just like,
Yeah.
Like
Well,
do
the
I,
way he
like,
ended it, showing the actual survivors.
Yep.
I mean that.
Now this is fascinating. This is fascinating. He shows the actual survivors with their counterparts and all of the people he saved. And as we get into some of this stuff, and by the way, that is where, as we can talk more, his choice of going black and white,
Right.
which changes that movie forever.
'Cause
If
there's
that
only-
movie is in color,
Right.
it is not the same
Because
impactful
we've talked
film.
about this. It's the color red.
Yes,
and
he shows you it's always candles.
Right.
The candle light is always colored because that's the eternal light.
And the color red was specifically
The girl with
jacket.
the red dress.
Well, then there was the
And blood.
blood,
And
then
he shows the blood on her red jacket.
Right.
Is red. That's the only thing that he shows in it. And again, he makes a conscious decision to go black and white with it.
Mm-hmm.
And the first scene is in color, and it's a family lighting the Shabbat candles on the Sabbath, the 2 candles, and they light it, and they disappear.
Right.
And all that's left is a shot of candles, and the candles fizzle out, and it becomes the smoke of the train, of a transportation train. And there are so many, and I was going to get back to what you're saying at the ending, but we'll stick with that for a minute. We'll get to that. There are so many moments. You talk about not just obviously the Holocaust and the dramatic aspect of that and feeling what you feel emotionally for this film,
Right.
but talk about the camera shots.
Yep.
Talk about the moments of the typing, both of the names and then later on the typing of the list. Talk about the incredible lighting in a black and white movie of the fact that the blood is so much more impactful in black and white than it is in red and gore that we talk about that other movies use. And so many shots of it's one shot stuff with this guy. And especially of you talk about the little girl in the red dress. And when Liam Neeson is watching from a distance on a hill on a horse as she's going through and they're showing the liquidation of the ghetto. And you're just following her and you are just clinging and jumping out of yourself. Oh my God, is she going to make it as people are getting shot all around her and going through this in this red dress? There are so many moments, even to the point in the opening shots, where they're showing you Liam Neeson getting dressed and he's the buttons and how he's putting on his clothes and it's showing you and he puts the little Nazi pin on. There is so much stuff there. And again, you talk about careers. Liam Neeson, Ray Fiennes. Can you ever watch Ray Fiennes, who is so evil and nobody knew who this guy was? Ben Kingsley. So Ben Kingsley's a known actor in it. He uses a bunch of no names. He uses real people from Poland and Germany, and that's what he fills his crew with and his cast. And he's not casting big name people aside from Ben Kingsley. What a risk. Like, you're going to make a Holocaust movie. You're going to have this character that nobody really knows about outside of the Jewish world and community, and Oscar Schindler. And you're going to tell this story with some actor named Liam Neeson, who at that point, probably the biggest thing he had been known for was he did the film, oh my gosh, in the 80s. Now my mind is going crazy. What was he did Darkman?
I was about to say, wasn't Darkman
he did
before that?
Darkman, and he did another movie in the 80s that I'm forgetting now. That was so like nobody even remembers. He was a nobody. Ray Fiennes was a nobody other than stage and doing things. What a risk.
Well,
what a chance.
His use of shadows to be able to emphasize
shadows and light. Yep.
eyes.
Yeah.
The way that he was able to emphasize, especially Liam Neeson's eyes, to be able to show more intensity with certain things that he wanted to push. The what?
What movie?
He was in, as we go there, let me just look. Yeah, no, he wasn't anything in that. And then I was just, no, go a little later. What was he in? Wait, I just saw it a second ago. Hold on. Deadpool. Oh my gosh. Yeah. He was in The Mission. He was in The Mission with De Niro then in a role that was a little bit bigger than what he normally had. Right. But that was what I'm talking about. Who knew Liam Neeson?
But, the ability to be able to use high contrast shadows and light to be able to emphasize his eyes in particular, to be able to put a little bit more intensity for his original introduction, for the time of when the girl came to try to beg for her parents to be able to come work at the factory. Whenever any kind of intense emotional piece came up for him where his loyalty was going to be tested, Spielberg's use of shadows and light to be able to point out the conflict that his character was feeling, and kind of slightly hide his true intentions, was just so brilliant. And it made you kind of start, the way that he consistently framed him, made you always have to pull back and go, wait. Is he the good guy, though?
Yeah.
I mean, what
womanizing?
Is he the good guy? I mean, what's he actually doing here?
Right.
And it's not until you get to the very end that you start to realize, so then
when you get to what's really going on,
and what about possibly the most here to me? And again, I didn't put Schindler's List as one. I tell you, I don't like putting anything on one. I had Jaws as my one when you guys made me do the list. But I will say this:
all three of us actually had it as number 2.
Oh, there you go. Okay. Any one out there, if you haven't seen Schindler's List, I apologize in advance, and I'm going to give this away. But anyone who's seen it, I challenge you to find me. He plays the audience in possibly one of the greatest sleight of hand maneuvers I've ever seen in my life of any film, which is they go to Auschwitz. He shows the scenes of them going into the gas chambers.
Yeah.
And everybody and their mother and their grandmother and the world thinks this is the moment that Spielberg is going to tackle the gas chamber. And he shows you everything to the moment. This is it. This is what they experience. This is it. He puts you there again in history. And the water comes on through the faucets. And they'd had that story where they're talking about in the bunkers, and this is what they heard happen. And he plays you, and you have a rush of probably like, oh my God, and they have a rush of joy, and you're probably happy. And then he comes out and he shows you the other group going down with back into the smoke of the chimney, and he never shows you.
But you know what they're going to.
But you now know, and it is so... I don't know if any other director can pull it off. I don't know how in the world. He shows you without showing you. He throws you in that surprising moment at that time, and then he leads you back, which goes back to the ending of what you're going to talk about. So talk about the ending of what he portrays, and I'm going to give you a fascinating little thing about the end of Schindler's List, and see if you catch it
off.
off.
The Neeson part or the after?
You say, and the ending of the movie, what does he show you? What is the ending of the movie?
So he shows the survivors of that Oskar Schindler actually pulled out from Auschwitz, and
all those years, the camps and everything.
The ones that were still alive, and the actors that portrayed them, some of their family members, especially the family members, if they weren't actually able to be there themselves. So
but is that really the end of the movie?
Something just clicked.
Yeah.
Is that the end of the movie? It's not the end of the movie. What is the actual last thing you see, Brad, Mike, at the end of Schindler's List. And this is where a lot of people miss it because they sit there in that last scene they remember is they're putting the stone on his grave and you see his shadow and you see his, that look. But what does he then do? What does Spielberg come back to? And I always point out to people and I say, here is the genius of Spielberg and you have to catch him. You have to realize it. What then does he go to? Anybody know? Anybody remember?
Yeah.
He goes to the credits. And what are the credits over? The credits are over the broken Jewish tombstones and graveyards of the cemetery that he now has with rain.
Yep.
And you hear the thunder and the lightning. And it's the idea, don't lose track of what it's all about, which is in memory of the 6 million and all of the others who died. That even with that moment of Schindler, and he makes it about saving it, he comes back. But he doesn't let the audience off the hook. Mm-hmm. He doesn't and I've always challenged that to people who try to say for years and years, Spielberg always likes the happy ending. Mm-hmm. Spielberg always likes the Hollywood ending. I say, time out. No. Time out. Schindler's List is that example of the guy who could have ended it with all the hope and all of this and all that, and he goes back to that to force you. Yep. And what does he do? Similar in Private Ryan. Yep. It's the cemetery. It's the flag then in the end of going, what does this all really stand for and what is it all? He does that as well as anyone out there. And even the man in his credits who does it over and over again still has something to send you with the message of what's going on. I find that fascinating. It's hard. It's hard to argue.
Sure.
But the one thing I give to Schindler's List that I've said to anybody, I have watched that movie for years and years and years, and I've watched that movie so many times. It's almost like I'm a sadist or something. But I've watched it from a film buff, loves Spielberg's mentality. Yep. And when that movie's on, it's very hard for me not to sit there and continue to watch it from whatever scene it's in, as hard as it is. But I have tried desperately. I cannot find what I would cut.
Sure.
No.
I have struggled with it. It's 3 hours long. Yep. I have struggled with it. Could maybe, my brother and I have had very heated arguments about the scene where they're like, oh, what's over there? And there's a village or there's somewhere and they show them walking down and they're playing this old Israeli song. And my brother always goes, oh God, this is like for our boogies and like for the great. And I say, no, it's very important that he shows that and what's going on. And then it translates into the survivors and all the generations, ages. But where do you cut?
Sure.
What do you cut?
Yeah.
In that movie, I don't know what you could.
There's a reason why it's the length it is.
And not because it's a Holocaust movie. Like, I want to make that very clear. I think what gets lost in Schindler's List is people want to say, oh, you guys think that because it's a Holocaust and David, you're Jewish and you're supposed to have some. It's not that. No, there have been tons of Holocaust movies made and none of, let me tell you, I can show you bad Holocaust movies made where I would cut it. And it's like, you just can't.
No,
you can't.
It's very much, like you said, there's not anything that realistically you can look at and be like, this movie would have been better if this wasn't in here.
Right. Exactly.
I can't think of anything.
And it's not just a movie about the Holocaust.
No.
You know, people say it's a Holocaust movie. It's also a movie about a man who's not such a wonderful role model and a good guy who's really interested in wealth and power and making money and doesn't really care all that much. And you're not really sure what moral compass he has.
Well, and you even start that
for most of the movie.
I'm about to say, as he's bringing all these people to work in this factory, you're like, oh, he's just...
He doesn't care about them
and then
for the first half of that movie. No. He doesn't care at all.
And you get to that scene at the end where they give him the ring and it's like to save one life is to save the world or whatever. And he drops it, shaking his hand.
And again, what is that great scene? Again, so Spielberg asks, he's wearing the prison outfit, he's in the car, and the reflection is all of the faces.
Yep.
In the, again, pure Spielberg.
Well,
Spielberg is best.
And then, like, you get to that end scene, too, where he just kind of looks at him and he just kind of whispers, I could have done more.
Oh, he just falls apart. And you just sit there and...
And then he's like, the car, I could have sold the car, and that would have
that would have been 10 more people.
And he takes the pen, and he's like, the pen would have been one person.
Well, and how can you... And I've always argued, and he's on a lot of those lists, Ray Fiennes you hate Ray Fiennes forever.
Oh my God.
And I love Ray Fiennes and you hate him forever. And it's very hard still to this day for me to watch Ray Fiennes and not think about Amon Goth and that character. And what does that say? And do you ever look at Liam Neeson, honestly, and still not see a little bit of Oscar Schindler? Like, I see it. Like, it's crazy. It's crazy when that a movie does that to you. But again, you talk about the casting. I mean, where is that movie without those selections?
That's one thing that he always knocks out of the park is the casting.
Yeah.
And where do you see, and again, and editing in that movie, Michael Kahn, who edits all of Spielberg movies. I don't know how that guy did it. I don't know where in the world he began. That has to be one of the hardest films ever in the history of films to edit that down. How do you edit that movie? And you'll say, oh, he got it to 3 hours. Yeah, but he did it perfectly.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, that's just it. Like, I just said a minute, like, I don't think there's realistically any scene that I could chop down or even take out.
And I'm not going to hijack the pod, guys, by the way. I'm not going to hijack the pod, but I do want to hear, Brad. I am going to put you both on the spot.
Continue. We're down to one camera.
I'm not going to hijack that as we've gone so far over. But you know what? In fairness to Spielberg, he would be proud.
What time is it?
It's 8:25.
How nuts is that? But Spielberg would be very proud of all of us. Spielberg would be proud. But I am going to hijack the pod and just say the following. Mike, I want to hear, do you believe he's the greatest director of all time?
Absolutely.
You do?
Absolutely. I don't think there's a question.
Whoa. I have never heard that out of Mike. And Brad?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Absolutely. Okay, so that I did not know that that's the way you guys felt.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, he makes...
I need a group hug. I need a group hug because that right there brings a smile to my face, and I'm so glad to see that even as the generations continue, that man has had that impact. That makes me proud.
Absolutely. So
we'll just leave out Always and Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
So yes,
1941.
Wow. Yeah, I think at this point we have gone so much ad nauseum about everything we possibly can for Spielberg. I'm actually surprised that this one camera has finally made it to the end
when
the other one didn't.
Spielberg, do we need to do like some cool thing on the way out?
Let's do it again.
Let's do Spielberg.
Good Lord.
That was take one.
Yeah.
50 more.
Sorry, what, Steven?
Talk about pushing the battery life on these things.
Yeah, no kidding.
Oh my gosh.
So yes, if you were watching the live stream and it just died,
sorry,
that's because my phone did not last as long as the camera. So
and who wasn't charging their phone today?
Oh no, it was charged fully.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Okay.
So with that,
very much Spielberg-like of what we've done here. I just want to point that out. If there was one director you were going to do this with, it was
no kidding.
So anyway,
so this will be the last time we ever do one of these ever, because dear God.
But yeah, so those are our top 10.
You realize I didn't have a beard when we started this.
I lose hair.
Yeah. So those are top 10 for Steven Spielberg, and so much more.
Now next week we'll be doing 10 through 20. And then,
which you could.
Yeah.
Let's just make this a year-long thing.
But, yeah, so if you are a fan of Steven Spielberg and have some thoughts that we haven't already just spewed out during all of this.
Which you don't, because we're better than you.
Definitely tell us about it in the comments. Let us know all about what your thoughts on Steven Spielberg are. What's your favorite movie of his? Why is it your favorite movie? Just please tell us all about it, and we would love to talk to you some more. So
we would?
Yes.
Okay.
But yeah, until next time, this is Brad and Mike and David.
David, The Last Call podcast, by the way.
Oh yeah, plug your
The Last Call podcast. Check it out. You can see it at iTunes. All that stuff. It's good stuff.
When do I get to
Sports, Brad. Mike will be back on. Don't worry.
Okay,
Maybe Brad will check it out. And we do talk pop culture and movies and docs and things like that. But guys, it's been an honor. We've gone way over time. Mostly my fault. I'm very, I have a lot of hot
Your wife's
air.
going to stab you. You know that, right?
Oh, without a doubt.
Okay.
This was my last broadcast. It was good to see you all. But but it was an honor. And they're really doing an amazing job. Tune in, subscribe to them, pay attention. They're doing great stuff. I'm very impressed. And I'll continue to plug it on my pod because they're worth listening to. I like these guys a lot. They're
Appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, until next time, this is Brad and Mike from Dallas Geek saying, see ya.